know that magic is real? Ever since I saw Papa Shango make black stuff drip down from the Ultimate Warrior's face back in the day, I knew that magic was real. You know how he did it? Bones. But animal bones won't do. Oh no. You see, you need real human bones. But sometimes, you gotta be a little creative with how you get these bones. Take for instance the time a Tumblr which came across some real human bones from a graveyard. So she decides that she's gonna take these bones and sell them on the internet so people can do magic with them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Bongazi. This video is sponsored by Helix. Helix makes premium mattresses and bedding, custom fit to your needs and shipped right to your door. It's coming up on about 2 years since I first got my Helix mattress, and since then I'm still having some of the best sleep of my life. When I had first gotten my Helix mattress, I had been complaining about neck pain and back pain, and since I've been on it, it is yet to return. It's really easy to get a Helix mattress of your own. You just take their sleep quiz, which helps determine what mattress is right for you based on your preferences and sleeping style. Since I'm a side sleeper who likes a soft mattress, they gave me the Sunset. And if you're nervous about buying a mattress from the internet, Helix gives you a 100 nights of sleep trial. That's more than 3 months. And if you don't like the mattress, they'll pick it up right from your door and issue a full refund. If you do like it, each Helix mattress has a 10-year warranty. And you don't have to spend a lot of money right up front with Helix's financing and payment plans. Just click the link below or go to helixsleep.com/wang. You'll get up to $200 off your Helix sleep mattress as well as 2 free pillows. One day in the middle of December of 2015, a Tumblr user made a hysterical call-out post. I know what you're thinking, what makes that different from any other day on Tumblr? Well, you see, this was a special call-out post. A post that would unleash the phenomenon known as the Bones Discourse, or Bongazi. The post, made by a user named Pastel Provera, read as follows. PSA. Tumblr user Little Fucking Monster is stealing human bones from cemeteries in Louisiana. Please don't let them get away with this and spread the word /signal boost. Now, as I alluded to before, calling people out on Tumblr is as common as breathing air. And this being a much more outrageous accusation than usual, some people thought it might have been a post satirizing the other call-out posts. But the ones willing to take it seriously at first needed some evidence. A reasonable approach considering it's the internet and anybody can say anything about anybody. Accusations are real easy to weaponize against people you don't like. The person accused, Little Fucking Monster, aka Ender, a self-described angry floofball with a love of kittens and BDSM, seems pretty much like if any of us were tasked with creating a hypothetical Tumblr person from scratch. Maybe they just pissed somebody off. No, as it turns out, there were receipts. And they were shared by a Tumblr user named NoPathFollowed. These receipts came in a form of a screenshot of a Facebook post from a private group called the Queer Witch Collective, which described itself as a collective of queer witches diverse in age, nationality, gender, race, class, ability, and more. To strive for a better community for everyone, we must acknowledge how privileges and oppression intersect across these labels. We are committing to forming an anti-oppressive/ethical space. As such, we actively combat forms of oppression, including but not limited to racism, ableism, sexism, cissexism, classism, colorism, casteism, etc. The post, made by Ender Darling, is as follows. Content warning, graves, bone hunting. Comment if there are added warnings needed. About 20 minutes from my house in New Orleans is what we call the poor man's graveyard. Most graveyards around here are full of above-ground graves because we live in a fishbowl, but there happens to be a graveyard where it's all in-ground graves, for those of us who are too poor to afford above-ground burial. When it rains, of course, bones wash up. The older the grave, the more you find. You can literally walk around and see femurs, teeth, jaws, skull caps, etc., etc. This is where I go to find my human bones. For curse work and general spells that require bone, I find human bones are easier for work with for me rather than animal bone. I can relate and work with the energy they carry, if that makes any sense. Anyways, I wanted to see if I started selling, basically cover shipping to wherever you happen to be, if people would be interested. I know human bones aren't easy to come by, and I usually have leftovers. I only go once a month, or when it rains here. And at first, the responses actually seem kind of interested, but they're also kind of cautious because they're not sure if it's legal to just go buy bones from a Facebook person. I noticed that specifically one of the people wanted to know if you could buy bones in New York, where I'm from. So I had to know, can I buy bones in New York City? And the answer is yes. In fact, you can legally buy bones in any US state except for Georgia, Tennessee, and now Louisiana. And there are actually many websites that will sell them to you. Of course, I imagine that most of these websites aren't just finding whatever bones happen to wash up. But with the legal concerns out of the way, there are also some ethical concerns that people were bringing up. Not the ethics of, digging up unwitting people's corpses for magic, no. The ethics of whether or not you're doing magic good. An article by Vice describes one of the interactions that hasn't been archived. Others sought to ensure that Darling's practices were ethical by magical standards. Are you making any sort of offering or payment at the graveyard to the dead or the spirits of the land? One user questioned. I bring drink and honey and flowers, Darling responded, later clarifying that they never actually dig for bones, but merely take what they find along their path. Me and my goddess have a pact, Darling explained. She provides the bones, and I only take what the earth gives, and I leave offerings. And even this line of questioning was kind of crossing a boundary in the group. You see, part of fostering that anti-oppressive space that the group mentioned in their mission statement involved not questioning other people's practices. In theory, this was to prevent the shaming of magical traditions from other cultures. But consider that this cemetery was identified by a number of group members as Holt Cemetery, considered by some to be one of the most haunted cemeteries in all of New Orleans. A potter's field with a history of grave robbing due to the conditions that Ender described, and which was in a location that would most likely have a lot of poor black people buried. At that point, you gotta start wondering what's more important in maintaining an anti-oppressive space. Not questioning someone's magical techniques, or not digging up the bodies of dead black people to do magic with. The group was a bit divided on this issue, with some members outraged for the reasons I've outlined, while others defending it, saying that the bones would have wound up in the garbage anyway and this gives them more purpose. But ultimately, one user had enough and the group sprung a leak. This is a public alert. Seriously, anyone know this little shithead? Better tell her to stay the fuck out of Holt Cemetery or her bones might get broken. I am not joking. Please spread the word and keep a lookout for yet another fucking cultural vulture. For fuck's sake, I am furious. This was the post that would bring this story out of the privacy of the group and into the public sphere. And as a result, the group kicked everybody out. Hey witches, it's come to our attention that people in this group were leaking information outing members as witches/trans/survivors and or lurking the group. To solve this, we removed all the group members except the mod team. Feel free to re-add yourself, we will screen and re-add members ASAP. At this point though, it was a little too late to put the genie back in the bottle. This thing was spreading all over Tumblr. There were some people on there who were contributing their serious thoughts to the Bones discourse. Was chatting up my friend who is a literal voodoo boker about this bone and grave robbing thing. She's been following it herself, but says that there's some bad karma to be had by taking the bones of people outside your family. The bones of family and ancestors actually have a lot of power to give to the living if treated properly and with respect. She says the white soccer mom witch should have just stuck with asking the spirits for some of their grave dirt. Others were simply content to see the end of what some members considered the great meme drought of 2015. And even others were quick to point out something that honestly drives me up the wall online. You know, all the time I'll have people send me video ideas that are like, this person on the internet is doing something illegal and you should make a video exposing them. Like, here's an idea, how about you expose them to the fucking police? YouTubers are not the police, and as much as YouTubers are not the police, Tumblr users are even less the police. But as it turned out, the police were actually already on the case. WWL News, a local Louisiana television station, had been alerted to the case to the original witch who made the Facebook call-out post. In the course of their investigation, they spoke to Adam Stevenson, president of an organization called Save Our Cemeteries, a local group dedicated to the preservation of cemeteries in New Orleans. He mentioned that this is actually a surprisingly common issue, and he referred them to his contact at the Attorney General's office, Ryan Seidman. When asked about Benghazi, Seidman had this to say. "We dealt with one of these problems last week, and this one came up this weekend," Seidman said. Seidman said that Holt Cemetery is one of the worst with this problem. He explained that it's because, unlike other cemeteries in this city, the people are buried underground. The remains break down quickly, and there is a lot of turnover in the cemetery, Seidman added. The report also mentioned that despite what you may think, this is actually just a misdemeanor. So if the Attorney General and half of Tumblr on their ass, Ender Darling made a new Tumblr account to fight back, with a massive post entitled, "No, I am not digging up fucking graves, JFC." In the post, Ender insists that their original post was taken out of context, and by selling the bones, they just meant someone covering the shipping costs. They also go on to accuse their detractors of being racist. You see, the type of magic that Ender Darling practiced was indigenous, or as they called it, indigenious, which I guess is a type of indigenous person who watches Rick and Morty. They also allege that people are threatening both them and their child. And now, I fully believe that the threats did happen because I've seen it happen with much less egregious things than grave robbing. But I also hate so much that these kinds of things get singled out to be used as a get-out-of-jail-free card for valid criticism. They continued to say that they did not get the bones from Holt Cemetery, and reiterated that they did not dig up the bones, but rather they simply found them. They argued that they had seen a backhoe digging into the graves to make room for more bodies, and it would have been more disrespectful to just leave them there where they would have inevitably wound up in the trash. There's also a bit of a jab at the other forms of magic practiced in the Facebook group, with Ender saying that they thought this was a safe space for dark, indigenous magic, and not as they call it, Wiccan or fluffy magic. I am not Wiccan. I am not fluffy. I work with death and bones, curses and hexes, the dark, and the things not for the faint of heart. And you ain't about to shame me for it. Shots fired. They conclude the rant by accusing other groups in New Orleans of stealing way more bones than they did. And while Ender didn't corroborate that statement, it is backed up by claims by the Attorney General and the Cemetery Preservation Group. But regardless, the law cares not for whataboutism. Either you committed a crime or you didn't. And on January 28th of 2016, Ender Darling's home was raided by the police, where they found at least 11 human bones and 4 teeth placed on an altar. They also subpoenaed Ender's Facebook message history, revealing admissions that the collection of bones had been going on since at least November 16th, and where they had several interactions with people making plans to pick up the bones from their apartment, with at least 7 instances of the exact address being given to interested parties. Seemingly, the police had Ender dead to rights here, but if you asked Ender what happened, you'd think it was no biggie. In a phone interview with the New Orleans Advocate that March, Ender Darling had this to say. "They were coming in seriously expecting to find bodies and human organs and have me and my roommates arrested for black marketing human remains," said Ender Darling, the self-styled witch, whose Facebook posts attracted a team of heavily armed lawmen to a mid-city home earlier this year. You should have seen their faces when they walked into the house and found a bunch of sleeping hippies. Several months later, Ender Darling was taken into police custody on July 15th and booked 2 weeks later with an $8,500 bail. Damn, I guess I should have cast some kind of spell that makes you not get arrested. It seemed that the passing of time made Ender think they got away with it, but the reality was the police were merely waiting for an analysis on the bones to determine whether or not they were really human remains. And it turned out they were real bones. But you know what? In the end, it didn't even matter. The only charges they could get to stick to Ender Darling were burglary and marijuana possession, which Ender pled guilty to. A 5-year suspended sentence was given for the burglary, and 15 days were given for the marijuana possession, with credit for time served. And this was the last the internet heard from Ender Darling. But it was clear that something had to be done about this failure of the legal system to protect dead bodies. And thus, Louisiana State Representative Neil Reiser, himself a funeral homeowner, introduced the Louisiana Human Remains Protection and Control Act, which enacted stronger penalties on people caught stealing human remains with increasing severity for repeat offenders. I mean, me personally, I don't care what happens when I die. Use my bones for magic, throw me in the fucking garbage. I promise I'll be too dead to care. The soundtrack of the original Resident Evil to me is special in the sense that it's a horror game soundtrack that achieves the rare accomplishment of being cinematic and atmospheric while at the same time also being memorable. It seems like it's so often that a horror game OST can creep you out and be very atmospheric. They'll elevate the mood, but to me it seems like it's very rare, especially now, that any of the tracks really stick with you after you turn the game off. But Resident Evil had so many earworms. You got the save room music, the guardhouse basement, Rebecca's theme, Barry's Revenge. You got the end theme Still Dawn, which is probably one of my favorite video game songs of all time. And then you got the Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock Edition soundtrack. That soundtrack is also special, but for very different reasons. You gotta wonder, why is this song that sounds like Little Sneezer's fart trumpet from Tiny Toons? Why does this exist when Resident Evil already had a perfectly good soundtrack? And how does it tie into perhaps the biggest hoax in the history of the Japanese music industry? Well, for this video, let's talk about the Japanese composer that got caught faking being deaf. So I was thinking about that Hudson Mohawk song from Reddit. You know, that really annoying song, there's that thing where the Redditor put it on his sex playlist. You know, that really annoying song that sounds like a seagull getting beaten to death in front of crying children by an elderly Englishman for stealing his chips.
Why, you little... I touch you! Stop! He's already dead!
I can't play the song because of copyright, but it's the one that goes like, heh, 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 heh. I don't know why I did it like Peter Griffin, but you get the point, you know the song. This guy puts it on his sex playlist, then he finds that his girlfriend hates it, and it winds up ruining the relationship. I don't want to do a video about that topic because it just got played out so fast, but it did remind me of another song. That song being the Mansion Basement song from the second re-release of Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock Edition. Now that's the song that belongs on your sex playlist. Composed by Mamoru Samarogochi, a deaf composer, this soundtrack only really exists because Capcom was a bit light on bonus content for the third release of the game. The main control was the brand new controller vibrations, but that's really not enough to sell a game for the third time. You need a little bit more than that. But they'd pretty much shot their load on the first director's cut, so have a brand new soundtrack, I guess. So let's take a look at the soundtrack. I mean, you got the classic Mansion Basement song that everybody knows. The one that sounds like it's performed on an instrument made entirely of tuned butt cheeks farting. So you're telling me, this song was written by a deaf composer? No way. You gotta be kidding me. I had a friend when I was a kid who, for unknown reasons, would always kinda like go like this. I don't know what this was. Whenever I hear that song, I think of that motion, and it's probably, if that motion made a sound, that song is the sound it would make. But the crappiness of this song has gone on to outshine a lot of the other fantastic turds that await you on this soundtrack. For example, you've got Barry's Conversation, which sounds like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. You got Wesker is Found, which sounds less like a song for a shady double-crosser and more like the theme for a mischievous kitty cat. And then you got the theme for the Black Tiger boss battle, which it sounds like the circus came to town, and then the elephants got loose and trampled everybody to death. But that's not to say that the score is entirely without good tracks. You have one track that I think actually kind of beats its counterpart in the original, that one being Disappearance. This one to me sounds a lot more dark and foreboding and makes me think of something that might have been on the Sweet Home soundtrack. You've got the Second Floor Mansion Revisited, which sounds like something that could have been on the Parasite Eve soundtrack. And then there's Rebecca's Safe in the Medical Room, which is probably my favorite track on this soundtrack. It reminds me a lot of something that you'd hear in a Fulci movie. In fact, it reminds me very specifically of certain songs from Manhattan Baby and The Beyond. The difference in quality between some of these tracks is so striking, it's almost as if two different people wrote it. But regardless of the quality of the soundtrack, its existence is a bit of an anomaly, as is its composer Mamoru Samarogochi, who with his hair sweep, shades, and baggy shirts, looks like a character that walked out of a Yakuza game. He looks like Hiroshi Tanahashi in a disguise living a double life. So let's take a look into this guy's story. Samarogochi was born in 1963 in Hiroshima to a couple of atomic bomb survivors. He was musically inclined from a very young age, creating compositions on a toy marimba that his parents had gotten him at 5 years old, and continued to compose throughout his childhood. According to a biography written about him by his record label Nippon Columbia, he was playing Beethoven and Bach by the age of 10, and through junior high and high school he taught himself music theory, harmony, counterpoint, instrumentation, and orchestration, and he declined to go to music school. He felt that it would have been a waste of his time. You see, he disliked modern classical music because he felt that, ironically, it was too atonal. He would instead continue to pursue his passion of making music as an adult by studying the work of Western classical composers. But then, tragedy strikes. He begins to suffer from severe migraine headaches that affect his hearing. And at the age of 24, he's diagnosed with a hearing disability with severe hearing loss in both ears. But despite this hurdle, not only does he keep pushing forward, but he demands to do things on his own terms. He's offered work composing for TV dramas, but he hated TV dramas. He turned them down because he felt these shows were garbage and he could do better. So instead, he worked at a video store and as a street sweeper, doing what he could to make money until he got a composition job that was up to his standards. That would come in 1997 with a film called Remembering the Cosmos Flower, a movie about a schoolgirl who gets AIDS from a blood transfusion. And then not long after, his second job would come, that being the infamous Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock soundtrack. And regardless of how that soundtrack was received, Capcom would hire him again not long after, this time for Onimusha Warlords. But tragedy strikes once again. While working on the soundtrack with only 3 songs left to compose, Mamoru suffers from a seizure that causes him to lose almost all of what was left of his hearing. But using his perfect pitch, as well as subtitled scenes of dialogue from the game, he powers through and completes the soundtrack. And this soundtrack is like night and day from the Resident Evil DualShock soundtrack. It's fully orchestrated, completely competent, and basically what you would expect from a samurai video game. In particular, the track Rising Sun became very popular. And it was this soundtrack that propels him to a whole new level of prestige. With Time magazine dubbing him the Beethoven of Japan, they wrote an article that tells his story, as well as where he's at after having created the Onimusha soundtrack. Today, Samarogochi works in a tiny, dark room in his Yokohama apartment. The saddest thing for me is not to be able to hear an orchestra perform my work, he says. But then I think, I am composing not for myself, but to make other people happy. As he turns up the volume on an MD player for a visitor, tears fill his eyes as he strains to hear the rhythmic beat of the taiko drums. Percussive noises are the only ones he can detect anymore. Curiously, Samarogochi believes his hearing loss has made him a better composer. I am not distracted, he says. I listen to myself. If you trust your inner sense of sound, you create something that is truer. It is like communicating from the heart. Losing my hearing was a gift from God. I mean, if going completely deaf is the difference between the Resident Evil DualShock soundtrack and the Onimusha Warlords soundtrack, he's probably right. But it was his next major work that would propel him from being a guy who's known for making good video game soundtracks to a national hero. After becoming fully deaf, he discarded all 12 of the symphonies he had previously composed. And it's at this time that he begins teaching piano at a school for disabled children. Inspired by one of his students, he begins work on a new symphony, Symphony No. 1. Hiroshima, a tribute to the victims of the bombing. and as a second-generation Hiroshima survivor, he was uniquely qualified to make this tribute. Completed in 2003, it was first performed in 2008 when G8 leaders would visit Hiroshima to reflect upon what had happened there, but it gained greater significance in the years following. It's 2011. Nippon Columbia is gearing up for their 100th anniversary celebration. This would include several releases, one of which being Symphony No. 1 Hiroshima. Then on March 11th, 2011, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan hits, leading to the Fukushima nuclear disaster. This event makes the tribute to Hiroshima even more poignant. Samaru Gochi comments, "The nuclear plant crisis has revived before our eyes the horrors of radiation that may have been forgotten in Japan, the only country to have been attacked with nuclear weapons," he said. "Now, it is high time that people in the world once again look at Hiroshima." The symphony would be released on CD that summer, and it would sell 180,000 copies. That might not sound like a lot for a pop artist, but for a classical musician, that's basically unheard of. In classical music, if you sell a couple thousand copies, you're lucky. So at this point, Samaru Gochi is a bona fide sensation. And in the wake of this release, he has a documentary film crew following him around as he meets with victims of the disaster. The documentary, Melody and Soul, the composer who lost his hearing, would be released in 2013, and this would mark the peak of his fame. It would also mark the point at which everything began to crumble. June of 2013, Samaru Gochi is interviewed by a reporter from the magazine Era. This interview was never published because of two things that the reporter witnessed. The first thing was that Samaru Gochi would respond to the reporter's questions before the sign language interpreter was finished with their movements. And the other thing happened at the end of the interview. The taxi to bring the reporter back shows up. The driver rings the intercom. As soon as the intercom rings, Samaru Gochi reacts. He stands up immediately and says, "I'm here." How did the deaf composer that's famously very deaf hear the intercom? So being suspicious of the legitimacy of the entire story, the reporter opts to not publish the interview. Instead, the magazine publishes an article entitled, "The Lies of Samaru Gochi Seen Through by This Magazine." But at the time, that article didn't amount to much, and Samaru Gochi's music was still being performed by orchestras around Japan. But it was during one of these performances that a composer named Takeo Noguchi noticed something else. This song, Symphony No. 1 Hiroshima, had plagiarized a bunch of other songs. Most flagrantly, work by Gustav Mahler. Noguchi wrote an article exposing this, but no music publications were willing to accept the article. You see, they were all sponsored by Samaru Gochi's label. So instead, it winds up being published by a news publication, Shincho 45, in November of 2013. But once again, at this time, it doesn't really amount to much. And now we're headed to 2014, the Winter Olympics in Sochi. Daisuke Takahashi, a figure skater representing Japan, was set to perform to one of Samaru Gochi's tracks, Sonatina for Violin, a composition that he had dedicated to a young violinist with a prosthetic arm named Miko Okubo. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, on February 5th, 2 days before the start of the Olympics, Samaru Gochi drops a bomb. Through his lawyer, Samaru Gochi had contacted NHK, the company that broadcast his documentary. In his correspondence, Samaru Gochi admits that since 1996, when working on his first movie soundtrack, Remembering the Cosmos Flower, he had been hiring a person to compose music for him. "I had to ask the person to help me for more than half the work, because the ear condition got worse." He offered an apology, and NHK apologized for ever having broadcast his documentary. However, at the time, he did not reveal the identity of the man who was secretly writing his music. But the next day, the man would reveal himself. Takashi Niigaki, a professor at the Toho Gakuen School of Music. At a press conference, he would give a rundown of their history together. It begins in 1996. Samaru Gochi had been looking for a composer's assistant, and Niigaki was the man who got the job. His first task? He's given a tape with a short theme for the movie, and he's asked to turn it into an orchestral piece. He noted that it's pretty common for composers to have assistants that'll help compose parts for different songs. But as the relationship continues, he demands more and more of him, where he's basically just making the whole thing. He'd give him descriptions of what he wants, with explanations like pursuit of abstract beauty in medieval religious music, rising music, musical harmony between dissonance and function adjustment, 4 themes, prayer, revelation, suffering, and chaos. And for a long time, Niigaki went along with it. Having only made the equivalent of about $70,000 over the course of 18 years, Niigaki explained that he didn't really care about the money. He was just excited to have work he made heard by people even if they didn't know it was by him. But throughout the years, Nagaki had become increasingly worried about the relationship, especially after the various expose articles that were written. He wanted out, but he claimed that Samaru Gochi threatened to kill himself if he stopped writing for him. Not knowing what to do at this point, Nagaki meets with that young violin player, Miku Okubo, and her family. He apologizes personally to them, but then he realizes that just wasn't enough, especially with the Olympics coming. He goes on to say that not only could Samaru Gochi not compose music at all, but he was faking his deafness entirely. At first he'd pretend to need sign language or lip reading, but as he'd get more engaged with the conversation, he'd drop the act. And eventually, when they'd meet, he just wouldn't even bother to pretend at all. The following week, in a handwritten letter, Samaru Gochi would claim that he was in fact deaf, but some of his hearing had returned over the course of the previous 3 years. He apologizes once again and goes on to hide from the public eye. And during this time, the story of how the Japanese Beethoven was a big fraud circulates all over the world. Capcom expresses their shock, as does his record label. And young Miku Okubo writes a letter stating that she's disgusted with him and adults in general, and she's going to give up playing the violin. Then a month later, Samaru Gochi finally emerges at a press conference of his own. He's clean shaven with short hair and no shades, just completely stripped of his formerly flamboyant persona. At the 2-hour-long press conference, he apologizes once again. He clarifies that although he did lie about the extent of his deafness, he does suffer from hearing loss. Just not enough to qualify for the legal definition of deafness, prompting him to return his certificate of level 2 physical disability. But he also said that Nagaki lied, that he was always asking for more money, that he exaggerated the degree to which Samaru Gochi was faking his deafness, and that he made up the suicide threats. And in response, he stated his intention to sue Nagaki for defamation, although no such lawsuit appears to have ever materialized. So what happens next? Nagaki, after spending nearly 2 decades in the shadows, gets to experience somewhat of a redemption arc. Later that month, he would perform live with Miku, who had in fact not given up violin. And 2 years later, in August of 2016, the first symphony written under his own name after the scandal was performed, Symphony No. 2, Litany. He would also return to the game industry in 2019, composing the theme song for the game Earth Defense Force Iron Rain. As for Samaru Gochi, you might be surprised that he's returned, somewhat recently actually. In October of 2020, a musical narrative series called Malleus Maleficarum appeared on YouTube. Although the music was at first uncredited, it would be revealed in February of 2021 that the music was in fact composed by Samaru Gochi. The producer of this product is Mr. Yasuyuki Hari, former chief producer of Fuji TV's documentary program The Nonfiction, who has worked on various works at the video production company However. Mr. Hari had the impression that Samaru Gochi was very soft-spoken and said, "I felt his passion for songwriting so strongly that I wanted to help him in my own way. I got involved." With photos of his new studio setup, Samaru Gochi expressed his gratitude for being able to produce music for the series. And when you listen to it, it doesn't sound like it was written by a guy with zero idea how to compose music. A long time has passed, who knows if he's up to his old tricks or not. But maybe he's not. I mean, there is something interesting to note. Although at this point, Samaru Gochi's name has been essentially wiped from everything he'd ever done previously, there's something that Nagaki said in his press conference that's often glossed over. During this press conference, he had stated that he had produced over 20 songs for Samaru Gochi, but the Resident Evil DualShock soundtrack has over 60 tracks alone. Onimusha Warlords over 40, which means unless he had other assistants, he most likely produced some of these songs on his own. That would explain so much. But anyway, that's the story of the composer who faked being deaf.
Walt Disney once said that our greatest national resource is the minds of our children. I disagree. I mean, let's be real for a moment. There's a reason why we know all the stories on r/woke kids are made up. Children, on average, are basically the dumbest kind of person, but sometimes a child's unique brand of stupidity causes them to discover something that an adult would never in a million years think to try. Take, for example, the street children of Zambia, who supposedly developed a concoction known as Jenkum. It looks like a bottle of Nesquik, but I assure you that's not Nesquik. Rather, it's a bottle of fermented sewage that the children were allegedly inhaling for hallucinogenic effects. And in 2007, after a series of posts about it online, it became the subject of a widespread moral panic as people believed that it was suddenly showing up in suburban American schools. But how much of the story was actually true? Find out on this episode of Tales from the Internet.
Taste with nutrition.
Jenkem is probably one of the most requested topics for me to cover on this channel. You probably saw that yellow balloon and clicked immediately, but if you don't know what Jenkem is, let me explain. Essentially, what people do, and you do not do this. Please. They fill a jar up with pee and boo, cap it with a balloon, and leave it out in the sun to ferment for a week or so. When your balloon is inflated, your Jenkem is ready to enjoy, giving you visions of God only knows what. And the thing is, there's actually a lot of confusion over whether or not Jenkem is real. It's often said to entirely be a hoax, such as in this article by SoberLiving.com, which concludes with the statement, "As an aside, the term jank has become quite popular with high school students lately. Kids will refer to something lame or bad as, 'That's janky.' Wow, hip slang too? What's next? Cockroach gin? Pea brownies? Sometimes I think I'm getting too old for this crazy world." That right there is a quality vintage boomer post. For the sake of this video, to put this question to rest, I was considering making my own in the name of science, but nah, it's just not worth it. But I don't think I had to actually make it, because it seems like there's a substantial amount of evidence supporting that, yeah, it is a real thing. In particular, the existence of Jenkem as a street drug before any of this internet sensationalism was often covered in stories reporting on the plight of children in Africa. Outlets that mentioned it in the past were BBC, the New York Times. It made it into one UNICEF report. And the earliest known reference to it was published in 1995 by IPS, the Inter-Press Service. Sniffing sewage is a symptom of the desperate plight of Zambia's street children. There are thought to be some 75,000 in the country as a whole, a number that has doubled in the past 8 years. Nobody knows exactly where the idea for making Jenkem came from, but it has been used by street children in Lusaka for at least 2 years. Nason Banda of the Drug Enforcement Agency is not proud when he says that it is unique to Zambia. He shudders when he sees the boys at the sewage ponds, scavenging for fecal matter to make Jenkem. So without having to go and make my own bottle, I think there's enough evidence for me to say, yeah, this probably is a thing that people actually do, somewhere in the world. But the real controversy comes when it supposedly made its jump to the United States of America. It begins on an internet forum named Tatsi, or the Temple of the Screaming Electron. In case you don't know about Tatsi, it began in 1989 as a dial-up bulletin board service that would be the host to a lot of controversial and unusual content. And then in 1997, it would shift to being a full-fledged internet forum. Think of it as being somewhat of a spiritual predecessor to 4chan. And with that in mind, it should be no surprise that it would be Tatsi that would popularize the concept of Jenkem in the United States. In particular, this takes place on June 7th of 2007 with a post by a user named Pickwick. Okay, today I set it up and put the bottle in the hot sun. My friend took pictures of all the steps. First I shit in the bottle, then pissed in it. I took a balloon and stretched it over the top to catch all of the gases. Now I will wait a few days and hope the balloon fills up. And the next day, hey everybody, time for an update. The bottle is on my porch at the moment. All day I let it sit in the hot sun, and surprisingly, the balloon is actually inflated a little bit. It is kind of standing up and has some gas in it. The shit on the bottom has bubbles floating on it. No pictures though. My mom took the camera to my brother's prom. Thanks for your support, everyone. Tomorrow, if the balloon is big enough, then I'm going to do some Jenkem. Another day passes. I took some pictures of the progress. The shit on the bottom has seemingly turned to sludge and mixed with some piss to make a layer on the bottom. The layer is softer than just shit. I swished the bottle around and it moved. Above that one, there's a layer of dark piss that has some shit in it. There's a steady stream of tiny bubbles moving up from the shit sludge layer through this layer. The balloon on top has inflated more since last night. I put a new label on the bottle because the last one got rained on. The glass inside the bottle has a coating of water from evaporation inside the bottle. And then finally, a few days later on June 13th, Pickwick would reap the fruits of his labors. Well, today I finally did it. I became probably the first person in America to huff his own shit gas. No video though, sorry, no camera. I hope you are not too disappointed. I could bet pictures though, and I wrote a trip report. Today the bubbles had mostly stopped. The balloon had possibly grown a little bit since the last time, but it was oblong from days in the sun or maybe from the gases inside, so it was hard to tell. The shit in the bottle was very settled and did not look like shit anymore even. I first lightly took the bottle to make sure all of the bubbles had popped. I then pinched off the balloon and took it off the top. I held that while I huffed from the bottle. After exhaling all the air from my lungs, I took my straw and inhaled from inside of the bottle. The flavor of shit struck me. It stuck to the tongue like the flavor after smoking a cigar. My body wanted me to stop breathing it, but I kept going by putting the end of the straw further back in my mouth behind my tongue. I took some more breaths of that and I waited a few seconds, then inhaled the balloon. The balloon was less harsh. I could barely taste any of it and it felt like breathing oxygen. After breathing it in, I immediately felt that I was passing out. I did not even have time to spit before I became unconscious. When I woke up, my spittle had oozed out of my mouth and down my chin. I asked my friend how long I was out for. He said for about a minute, and that he had repeatedly tried to wake me, but I would not wake up. During this short conversation, I began to feel light dissociative effects come over me, accompanied by buzzing in my ears. The feeling got stronger and stronger until I felt like I was in a dream. This was somewhat enjoyable. It made me feel like nothing really mattered. The apathy actually made the rest of the trip more enjoyable. After I was fully in the dreamlike state, visual hallucinations began to start. I had fleeting visions of people who seemed completely random, like my second grade teacher. I would say something to the person and then he or she would disappear. Normally, I would be fearful of trips like this, but the dream feeling made it almost fun. Hearing was dull during the trip. I could only hear what I was saying and some random noises like screeching and car noises. After the effects wore off, my friend told me that I was mostly talking in gibberish, so I guess I couldn't hear my own voice anything in the outside world throughout the trip. At the peak of the trip, I saw things like pillars in my lawn that disappeared and shapes in the sky. My sense of time was slowed, so the whole trip felt like it was shorter than it was. The come down was mostly auditory hallucinations, like voices and loud cracks. The dreamlike feeling lessened and I drifted back into reality. In the last parts of the trip, I became paranoid from the noises because it felt real instead of like a dream. I asked my friend how long it had been. He said about 40 minutes. He also told me that I spent long periods of time staring at different spots. I also, according to him, spoke slurred words to trees and rocks. I was very surprised by how messed up the Jenkum got me. That was higher than I had ever been. Other drugs distort reality, but Jenkum really distorts reality. I was almost completely unaware of my surroundings. My friend said that seeing me was scary and he was thinking of getting an adult. Thank God he didn't do that. In conclusion, was it enjoyable? No, not really. Would I do it again? Defiantly not. Would I recommend another person to try it? I wouldn't to anyone who I am close to. If you are very adventurous and would try anything, then I guess you should try Jenkum. But I know that the preparation is not made worthwhile by the trip.
Jenk, come on. It's not good.
This thread would go on to pick up a ton of steam across the entire internet, not just Totsi. And Pickwick would go on to boast about the popularity of his post, noting that it had made the front page of both Dig and Encyclopedia Dramatica. He shared the very 2007 memes people made, like the MasterCard parody and the Magic cards. He was also excited that someone had emailed South Park Studios about his adventures and encouraged more people to write to them, hoping that it would one day get on the show. But Pickwick's enthusiasm would wane a few months later, when this bulletin was issued by the Collier County Sheriff's Office in Florida. On 9/19/07, Corporal DeSaro received an email from a concerned parent regarding a new drug called Jenkum. The parent advised their child learned about this drug through various conversations with several students at Palmetto Ridge High. Jenkum originated in Africa and other third world countries, because as you all know, Africa is a country, by fermenting raw sewage to create gas which is inhaled to achieve a high. Jenkum is now a popular drug in American schools. It then goes on to describe the process of making and consuming your own Jenkum, which I'm sure you've heard enough times in this video by now, and it also has a list of slang terms for Jenkum. Winnie, shit, runners, fruit from the crack pipe, Leroy Jenkums, mite, butt hash, and waist. And of course, plastered all over the bulletin were Pickwick's pictures. The story would then get picked up by Fox 30's News, which also showed Pickwick's pictures. It was no longer confined to places like Totsie and Encyclopedia Dramatica. Now, Pickwick was the national face of sniffing your own shit. And once that started to happen, Pickwick rushed back to Totsie to claim that the whole thing was a hoax. He now said that the actual contents of his jar were flour, water, beer, and Nutella. He then stated, "I never inhaled any poop gas and got high off of it," he wrote on September 24th. "I have deleted the pictures. Hopefully no weirdo saved them to his computer. I don't want people to ever recognize me as the kid who huffed poop gas." It's a little too late for that, buddy. Me personally, I think he really did it, but I'll put up a poll so you guys can answer and give me your opinion. And despite his damage control, the legacy of Jenkem would continue to spread, and he did achieve his goal of having it referenced on South Park. A few months after Jenkem went viral on the internet, in 2008, South Park had an episode called Major Boobage, in which Kenny gets addicted to the hallucinogenic effects of cat pee. And all that being said, regardless of whether or not Pickwick actually did it, there is literally zero indication that this was ever a trend in American high schools. But that did not stop this moral panic from spreading to more and more districts. And the reason why that happened is actually pretty fitting. You know how I said earlier in the video that Totsie was basically the spiritual predecessor to 4chan, right? Well, it was 4chan that took this ball and ran with it. In one particular 4chan thread, a campaign began to send this email to school faculties. "I am writing you anonymously because I do not want my child to get in any trouble, but I need to alert you to something your students are doing that is potentially very dangerous. Yesterday afternoon, I came home early to find my son and his friends getting high on something called Jenkem, which they say they heard about at school. This Jenkem is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of. They urinate and defecate in plastic bottles and leave them to ferment in the sun, then inhale the resulting gas. I know it sounds unreal, but when I came home, I found my son and his friends laying on the grass in the backyard, and they were acting very strangely. There was a horrible, putrid smell in the air. I can't believe my son would do something like this. I looked it up on the internet, and apparently this was something invented by African children that wound up online, and now kids all over the world are doing it. My son says most of his friends at school have tried it. This seems to be a new thing, and I can't find any information about the health effects of Jenkem. I think it is the methane and ammonia content that provides the desired high, but I don't really know. Both of those are very harmful chemicals. All sorts of diseases are spread through fecal matter. I imagine it could lead to some very serious health problems at your school. My wife and I are utterly shocked and talking about private school. We have spoken to our son about this, and he says he won't do it anymore, but because it is on the internet, kids all over the country are trying Jenkem, and they need to be educated about the health risks. It is only a matter of time before somebody dies from methane poisoning or this leads to a hepatitis outbreak. I don't know exactly what you could do about this as Jenkem is legal, but I need to inform you of what some of your students are doing. And many of these emails that were sent out received responses from schools that indicated that they would be informing the parents about this, inevitably leading to soccer moms all around the country having sit-downs with little Jimmy to tell them to not sniff their own ass shit. And all that's not to say that Jenkem has never, ever had a presence in the US. There was the one time, back in 2011, when NBC5 reported on a disaster at a Jenkem lab.
And police think they know why this tenant had so many containers of excrement in his apartment. Officers believe he may have been huffing Jenkem.
Jenkem. Not even once. You hear a lot these days about loot boxes being gambling for kids. And while loot boxes are a terrible game mechanic and they suck, that version of gambling for kids has nothing on the version of gambling for kids that I grew up with. Feast your eyes upon the ultimate gaming rig. Sega Genesis, Neo Geo, TurboGrafx 16, Super Famicom, a stereo, a big screen TV, a hi-fi VCR. Every 90s kid's wildest dreams were only $5 and a crossword-like puzzle away. But come on, it definitely wasn't that simple. And therefore I present to you the story of the ultimate gaming rig. If you were an avid reader of game magazines from the early 90s to the mid to late 2000s, as I suspect many of you are, you've definitely come across one of these ads. Every console you could possibly have at the time combined with a top-of-the-line home theater system and sometimes computers. And what's even better, this isn't just the usual sweepstakes where you mail it away and you have a 1 in a million random chance to get picked to win. No, this was skill-based. And being the high IQ gamer that you are, you're definitely gonna win this, right? It first appeared in 1991, presented by a company called Pandemonium, and it would return month after month for years with different names like Puzzle Me, or Bane Dramage, or Rattlebrain. You have the power. In this contest, you don't rely on the luck of the draw. You determine if you win or not. You win by outscoring others in a game of skill. Can you solve the puzzle below? Then you have what it takes. It looks simple, but it's only the start. Each of 5 more puzzles gets a little harder, but this time, it's all up to you. Stay into the end, and the gear is yours, with whatever options you want. Do you have what it takes? Then play to win. Video game contest. Play any 16-bit game in the world with this lineup: Neo Geo Gold, Nintendo Super Famicom, Sega Genesis and the TurboGrafx 16. Get all 4 or trade the ones you don't want for cash. Bonus options, adapters, games, accessories, cash and more. Media Rig contest. The ultimate gaming environment. 40-inch monitor, 130-watt receiver with Dolby Pro Logic surround sound. Infinity speakers, subwoofer, CD player, graphic EQ, dual cassette, and hi-fi VCR. This rig will blow you away, literally. You'll not only see it, but feel it. Directions. Fill in the mystery word grid with the correct words going across to spell out the mystery word down the end. Hint, use the word clue. In the future, there will be 4 more puzzles at $2 each, and 1 tiebreaker at $1.50, which will arrive by mail. You will have 3 weeks to solve each puzzle. We don't how many will play, but typically 47% will have 30% to phase 2, 25% to phase 3, and 20% to phase 4. The tiebreaker determines the winner. If players are still tied, they will split the value of the prizes. Alright, let's do this. Wow, the mystery word. Blank games. Gee, I wonder what kind of games they might be talking about. I don't know. What a test of wits this was. Alright, so as you probably guessed, I did enter this contest once. And although the puzzles did get a little bit more difficult each round, they were still mostly really easy. Each round you would get similar word puzzles, but eventually a mechanic is introduced where the points have score values, and it's not so much a thing about finding the mystery word or things like that, but getting the highest score. When you get to the last round, there is a completely blank grid, and it sort of becomes like this game of anything goes Scrabble. I remember when I got to that last round, I wrote up like 10 different versions of the puzzle, and I thought I had gotten the highest possible score, but I guess not because I didn't win. That is, unless maybe the whole thing was a scam and it wasn't winnable, but nobody really knew for sure. It was a thread started on May 7th of 2004 on the cheap-ass gamer forums that would eventually lead us to the answer. The successful dropout. I don't know if this has ever been posted, but I've seen this contest in magazines forever, and have always wanted to try it out, so I signed up and completed the first set of puzzles. Now I'm waiting for the next set to be mailed to me. It goes like this. In some magazines, recently the June 04 issue of PSM on page 61, they have this contest advertised, where you pay as you play, a few bucks, filling out mystery word grids and puzzles to compete with other people who are filling out different versions of the same puzzle for prizes. You can win the ultimate gaming rig of over $20,000 in prizes. They have a computer contest, video game contest, and media rig contest. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Has anyone ever tried this? Is it a scam? Many of the other forum users expressed that they were surprised that this contest was even still going on, and many assumed that it was just a scam. But nobody could really answer for sure, and shortly after the thread fizzled out. The thread had been abandoned and forgotten about for over a year until October 2005, when it was resurrected by a user named Mr. McGee. Mr. McGee had gotten in touch with the man who ran the contest. I decided to be so bold as to email Rattlebrain and ask them whether this contest was legit or was it a scam. Amazingly enough, they replied. The following is the letter from the contest director. None of it has been manipulated. BTW, I posed under a different name just in case. Hi, Stephanie. I've been doing puzzle tournaments for 20 years. At that time, if I had been a scam, none of the magazines would let me advertise. I do what I say I will do, and if you find yourself not happy at the end of the contest, I'll send you a complete refund. This is why I have lasted so long. I hope you give us a shot. Rick Lund, Contest Director, Bane Dramage Inc. I also asked several other puzzling things about their contest. I'm waiting for their answers. I might just post them. After his thread was revived, the successful dropout returned to tell us the status of his entry. I forgot all about this thread. Anyways, I didn't win. Why? Because the puzzles that they send you are all time sensitive, and they sent the last set of puzzles to me later than the due date. Great scam, bastards. Sounds pretty sleazy, right? Well, as it turns out, I guess he should have checked the fine print. Mr. McGee, I was smart enough to get my hands on their official rules. If it came after the deadline, it is not their fault. It is the postage system's. I was worried that because of Hurricane Katrina, the mail system was clogged or destroyed or something like that. Not that I wasn't worried about the victims either. I donated a lot of money. It was just a thing that bothered me. It was like 4 weeks between the puzzles, so yeah. Anyway, their official rules explain a lot too. What caught my eye the most was the possibility of getting a full refund if my puzzle came past the deadline or if I'm not happy with the contest results. I might just post it. Also, I'm in the finals and just mailed it out. On the off chance I do win something, I'll take pics or something. From this point on, the thread would remain a lot more lively, with people coming throughout 2005 to compare their contest entries, theorized about whether or not the contest is a scam, and recall the episode of Doug that had a contest like this that turned out to be a scam. A few other people from the cheap-ass gamer forums managed to get in contact with Rick Lund, who would either delay their responses or give them stories about sore losers giving him problems. And it was on January of 2006 that Rick Lund sent out an email clarifying the sore losers problem. To all customers of Bane Dramage who have sent us email, once again we are extremely sorry about our slowness to respond to emails. We have had an ongoing problem which has rendered our email completely unusable. A couple of disgruntled contestants who were angry at losing the contest have embarked on a massive phony email solicitation campaign. They have used our email addresses to bury us in a sea of spam, which has made it impossible to have time to distinguish between customer mail and spam. We're talking about thousands of emails per day. This, of course, jams our inbox and prevents many emails from even getting to us. We humbly ask that you forgive us for this problem. We have now established a new email address for you to direct your questions. It is banedramagehelp@mac.com. If the questions you may have had are still relevant, please resubmit them there, and we will respond in a timely fashion. Slowly at first, and then more quickly as we catch up. If you had questions which hurt your participation in the contest when they went unanswered, let us know and we will send you a prompt refund of all entry fees if you so request. Once again, we apologize for this deplorable situation and we thank you for hanging in there. It's strange that an email spam problem was able to completely bring this operation to a halt, which makes you wonder, was this all just one guy running a contest out of his bedroom? But after the email problem was resolved, the contest went on as usual, but nobody from the cheap-ass gamer forums was able to secure the W. And once again, that's if the game was even winnable, and no one seemed to know for sure. Well, the answer to whether or not the game was winnable, as well as the explanation for the constant name changes, came in a post by a user named Karcheroth in February of 2006. Hi everyone that entered the Bane Dramage contest. In the past, I had entered this contest when it was known as Pandemonium Inc. At that time, I didn't win, but when I entered the second time, I won all 3 finals. That's where the fight began. At that time, Rick, the contest owner, lived in Minnesota and proceeded to move to Oregon with no forwarding address to me. After 3 or 4 months, I tracked him down to where he is now and confronted him over the phone. He gave me a sob story that he had no money, was going through a divorce, and had no money to pay me. I didn't care. I wanted my winnings, and after more phone calls and heated arguments, he sent me a small portion of what I was owed, about a fourth of the total. It took almost a year from when I won to when I received even that much. You could imagine my surprise when a month later I noticed the same contest advertised again, only this time under the name Puzzle Me. So to see what would happen, I entered again and I won 2 of the 3 finals, computer and home theater. Once again, months went by with no prize winnings. Again, I phoned him, and this time he told me he was declaring bankruptcy and wouldn't be able to pay me a dime. I thought it was a lie, but a month later I received court documents from Oregon asking me to put a claim in, but as he had no assets left, in all likelihood I would receive nothing, so I didn't bother. Well, imagine my surprise when about a year later the exact same contest was advertised yet again, but no Under the Rattle Brain. This time I couldn't enter because I had just turned 30, but I kept track of this company looking for problems through the Better Business Bureau, and sure enough, a complaint was lodged against this contest as well. I hope this time will be different for whoever wins, but from my own personal experience, I have my doubts it will. Also, my winning scores range from about 17,500 to a high of 18,418. Anything under 17,000, unless the high letters are X or J, will in all likelihood not win. I hope this helps wondering about this contest. And a month later, another former winner named Moth would come forward. I enjoyed reading all the posts on this page and decided to post my own story in case anyone else is trying to research this company. Another page you need to read is Game Set Watch, which shows many if not all of the advertisements for this contest. It is hard to find real information about the company that offers this contest. That is your first clue. I entered the contest about 10 years and countless incarnations of this company ago. I worked really hard on the final puzzle, which is difficult and variable enough that only one person is likely to get the high score. It requires you to use the Oxford English Dictionary and other dictionaries to find really obscure and small words, and fit them into a grid in such a way as to obtain the highest possible score. Long story short, I won. Imagine my pride at having beat all the thousands of people who entered the contest, and my anticipation of winning all this awesome stuff. Guess what? That's right, I got nothing. What I did get was a series of what I believe to be the official courtroom proceedings of the bankruptcy of what was Pandemonium. I cannot make a claim on what was due to me because the amount was too small. I went so far as to obtain a consultation from a lawyer who directed me toward the Better Business Bureau. I was in college and decided not to try to pursue legal action, because who has the time and money for that when what you're owed is relatively small, and you're trying to get it from a bankrupt company, and you're a broke college student? I still have all the paperwork from everything I did for the contest, all my countless words that I found, and the myriad grids I filled in trying to achieve the best score that I could. And let's not forget the documents of the bankruptcy proceedings. It all serves as a reminder of the hard work I did, which I am proud of, and the fact that there are people out there in this world like Rick Lund who are failed, worthless human beings who make a living preying on the dreams of innocent young people, stooping to the lowest depths and using the loopholes in the court system to continue to perpetuate a business scam, calling kids sore losers when they justifiably complain and criticize the operations of this puzzle contest. Just look at the number of times this business has changed names and addresses over the years, folks. Legitimate businesses change locations maybe once in 10 or 20 years, when they outgrow their location, want a bigger demographic, buy out another company, etc., but rarely do they change names frequently. Caveat emptor. Yes, I probably should have known better, but like the others on this page, I had seen the ad for a long time and was curious to see if it really was legit, and if so, whether I could actually do what it took to win. What I got was a lesson in the dark side. Do not enter this contest. Put your money and energy to work in other endeavors that are likely to pay off. As for Rick Lund, if I ever find him, I'm going to chop off his you-know-what and feed it to him, if somebody hasn't already beaten me to the punch. And then a little under a year later, another former winner named Abigoria would come forward. Hello everyone, it has been a long time since I entered Pandemonium and Puzzle Me contest. I have been a winner 3 times while under the name Pandemonium, and 3-time winner under Puzzle Me, so a total of 6 times I have won. As of this day though, I have only received enough money to pay just 1 out of the 6 times that I have won. I have called Rick Lund so many times and been so patient with him, and have always, when I talked to him on the phone, I was given a story of why he can't pay me, but always kept my hopes up that in the future he was going to be able to pay. Example, after he runs another contest he would have money to pay me then. So yeah, I kept my hopes up, and yeah, I got paid only $500 a month, and that $500 a month only lasted a few months because the company filed bankruptcy and started up again under the name Puzzle Me. I entered Puzzle Me contests and won 3, but it didn't matter because the same thing happened again. Although I got a little more this time than before, but still, I nearly won $50,000 in total between the 6 contests, and maybe received a total of $6,000. The figures are vague, as it's been so long ago and I can only base it on memory, although I do have all my records of my winnings. So to anyone that entered this contest, it's impossible to win if you don't know what you are doing, and if you do know what you are doing, it's still a slim chance on winning. And finally, if you do win, I wouldn't expect to actually receive what you won, based on my past experience with Pandemonium, Puzzle Me, and Rick Lund. I am in total shock to find out that he has yet another contest going again under another name. It is unbelievable how this can keep on going for all these years, but I guess it's people like me that won and just sit back and accept what he pays us and don't push it any further or take legal action. And that is why I am guessing he can still keep on running these contests. If anyone on this forum wins the recent contests, I like to know how it turns out with actually getting your prizes / money. Good luck to anyone doing these contests. So with all that in mind, here's what we know about these contests. They actually were winnable, and you actually had to get a really good score to actually win them. This meant that the company's staff, or maybe even Rick Lund himself, had to go through thousands of contest entries by hand. This went on for over 15 years, and it seems like just about every time when people did win, they wouldn't get anything that they won or just a small piece of it. It seems strange to me that someone would create such a complicated system just to scam people when there's so many less involved, less hands-on ways to deprive people of their money. I mean, isn't the whole point of scamming people to get a lot of money for little to no work? So I have an alternative hypothesis. What if Rick Lund actually did set out to create a legitimate contest business, but at the end of the day, he just didn't have what it takes to run a business like this? When I look into the story of this contest, it reminds me of how I used to read these books on entrepreneurship and, getting rich and things like that. And a lot of times you would come across stories of people who started their empires with very simple ads in magazines and newspapers and things like that. But in the case of a business like this, where he's just advertising a very appealing thing in a video game magazine, he goes from just being some dude working out of his bedroom to all of a sudden he has thousands of pieces of mail to go through, probably by himself. And we could see the evidence for that by the fact that he's sitting there talking to people on the phone himself and responding to emails and dealing with email spam by himself when an abler businessman would be delegating these menial tasks to employees. So he's clearly in way over his head, but at the same time, he's got envelopes full of money coming to him month after month after month, year after year. So he throws his hands up in the air and says, fuck it, and keeps the thing running until the wheels fall off. In practice, this leaves us something that's basically indistinguishable from a scam, but I think it's important to know what was going on in Rick Lund's head while running this thing to really understand the story of the ultimate gaming rig. I'll put a poll up and see what you think. And I would also like to know if there's anyone watching this who wasn't in that thread that won or actually successfully got their refund. Let me know in the comment section. They say that a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. And in this current social media climate where people rarely read past an article's headline, and viral posts are taken at face value without the slightest attempt at fact-checking, this statement has never been truer. Countless people will come into contact with a full story if it's tantalizing enough, but far fewer will ever see the inevitable correction. And once the world's attention is moved on, the people involved are left to fix the damage done by the spectacle. Consider the story of Heidi Ye, the model in this viral image. You might remember hearing about the Chinese man who sued his wife after they had ugly kids. He said that she deceived him by having plastic surgery, and the Chinese courts awarded him hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or did they? Of course, that story wasn't true, but thousands of people, maybe millions, fell for it. So what happens when strangers all around the world are manipulated into having the wrong opinion about you? Find out in this episode of Tales from the Internet. Urban legends have been a staple of the internet for as long as people have been communicating with each other online. And while it can often be annoying when the people around you are falling for them, for the most part they're pretty harmless. Think back to the infamous lobster story that I covered a few years ago on this channel. Even though there's no possible way it's true, tons of people still fell for it, but at the end of the day, maybe you shouldn't do that with a lobster. It's sound advice. It's when an urban legend takes the leap to full-fledged fake news that it becomes a problem. It becomes dangerous and it can hurt real people. And that's exactly what happened to Heidi Ye. It begins in October of 2012 when this story started to go viral. A man from northern China divorced and sued his wife earlier this year for being ugly. That's not a joke. Neither is this. That man recently won the lawsuit. That man is Jian Feng, and he said his issues with his wife's looks only began after the couple's daughter was born. Feng was appalled by the child's appearance, calling her incredibly ugly, and saying she resembled neither one of her parents. With that being the case, Feng initially accused his wife of cheating. It was at that point that his wife, who had not been named, came forward, saying she had spent $100,000 on intense plastic surgeries to drastically change her appearance before she met Feng. She never told Feng about these surgeries. When Feng found out about the procedures, he filed a lawsuit. He said the woman convinced him to marry her under false pretenses. A judge agreed, awarding Feng $120,000. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I know even less about the laws in China, but I'm pretty sure that you can sue someone over ugly babies. I mean, even with the plastic surgery, I've known some pretty good looking people who had no plastic surgery to my knowledge and still managed to pop out some pretty fucking ugly babies. And even if you could sue, $120,000 seems a bit high. But like I said, I don't know Chinese law, and maybe a big reason why this story propagated so much is because people are like, oh, China's a mysterious land with mysterious customs. But that's neither here nor there, because the story can actually be traced all the way back to 2004. That's when it was reported in a Chinese publication called the Heilongjiang Morning Post. And the thing about that publication is that it has a history of publishing made-up stories. Essentially, it'd be like sharing an article from the Weekly World News as fact. But that did not stop it from being reported by the Huffington Post, the New York Post, the Daily Mail, Fox 31, the Irish Examiner, and the Mirror as a legitimate story. But you might have noticed from these articles that I just showed you screenshots of that they're using a different picture. To get the full story, we're gonna need to go back to the beginning of 2012. There's this up-and-coming Taiwanese model named Heidi Ye. She's getting a ton of work, TV ads, magazine ads, she's doing real good. Then one day, she accepts a job for a print advertisement for a plastic surgery company. That's when she takes this photo. It depicts two very good-looking parents with three really ugly kids. And it has a caption that roughly translates to, "The only thing you have to worry about after plastic surgery is the explaining you'll have to do to your children." And people might be like, oh, that's mean, but the thing is, the kids' faces are photoshopped, and the Chinese in general just tend to not get butthurt about those kinds of things like we do in the West. It's just a silly ad to promote a plastic surgery company. So the picture does its job and Heidi moves on with her life and her career, but then, later on in 2012, the picture appears once again. This time, it's on the Facebook page of another plastic surgery company. And once that thing gets on Facebook, it starts to circulate. At first, it's mostly ordinary memes like this demotivational poster, which even by 2012 standards is pretty boomer-ish. Shit doesn't really hit the fan until someone on Facebook decides to combine the story about the man who sued his wife over ugly kids with the plastic surgery ad. Which honestly doesn't really even make that much sense. I mean, look at the picture. Does this guy look like he's unsatisfied with his hot wife and his ugly kids? But you know, there's no room for common sense when it comes to these kinds of things. This point is when the story goes super viral and thousands of people are sharing it all over Facebook. Not only are people sharing the post, but people are taking the picture, taking the story, and re-uploading it on their own pages, because you know that's what people do on Facebook, steal content. And on top of that, now some news outlets are taking the story, publishing it again, now with the picture. And of course, you've got those soldiers out there fighting the good fight, trying to debunk it in the comments section, and you've got some publications that published retractions, but there's just no fighting against the Zerg rush of human stupidity. Once the story's out there at that magnitude, it can't be controlled. Meanwhile, back in Taiwan, Heidi was none the wiser until the story made its way to a Chinese tabloid. In an interview with BBC, Heidi describes what happened next. "When I first heard about this from a friend, I thought it was just a one-off rumor," said Miss Ye. "Then I realized the whole world was spreading it and in different languages. People actually thought it was real. Even my then boyfriend's friends would ask about it. The picture and accompanying stories came up on Google in several languages, including Arabic, English, and Japanese, and have become a global meme. People refused to believe that I had never had plastic surgery. Clients would ask me if I was the woman in the picture. After this, I only got small roles in advertisements. It also," she says, "affected her personal life. She suspects her then boyfriend broke up with her partly because he was embarrassed by the rumors. She says relatives and her current fiance's family have also asked about them. Strangers would spot her in public and gossip about her," she adds. So with her personal life messed up and her career in shambles all due to a fake news story, what's left to do except start suing people? But she knows enough to know that you can't go and sue the entire internet. Once it's out there, it's out there. But as of 2015, she says that she is pursuing legal action against her former modeling agency as well as the plastic surgery company that posted the ad to Facebook. And while you might be thinking that, well, she signed her rights away, she has a contract, that may not necessarily be so. According to her claims, she only gave rights for that single print ad. She claims that she granted no rights for online publishing and she never gave permission to reuse the image. And in response to that, both companies say that they're gonna sue her back. As of the making of this video, there doesn't seem to have been any resolution to this case, but if it does happen, I'll keep you updated. So what can we learn from this? For the love of God, please do a little bit of fact checking before spreading around ridiculous inflammatory stories.
Vertical integration is a concept in business in which a company owns multiple stages of production in order to reduce costs, maximize profits, and streamline the overall operation. For example, Apple manufactures their own hardware. They develop their own software that's then sold through their own stores. I sell t-shirts. Maybe I could screen print my own t-shirts and buy a sweatshop somewhere in Asia and have my clothes sewn together by children. I don't do that, but I could. What if your business was, I don't know, selling human body parts? It would be pretty convenient then to also own a funeral home. Get a nice stock of dead bodies. Well, that's exactly the idea that Megan Hess, an entrepreneur in Colorado, had. But as she soon learned, things can get a little messy when dealing with human remains. So for today's episode, let's talk about the funeral home owner that sold her customers body parts without their consent. Personally, I don't really care what happens to my dead body after I die. I have no use for it anymore. For all I care, you can tie me to the back of a truck and drag me around like Big Boss Man did to the Big Show's father. I realize though that I'm not normal in this regard. So when weird stuff starts happening to people's dead family members' remains, they kind of feel some type of way. So when you die, you got a few options. Among them, you can get buried, you can get cremated, maybe you donate your organs. To tell this story, it's a bit important to distinguish, though, between organ donations and donating your body to science and research or whatever. You know, you got that organ donation checkbox on the back of your ID. My mother always told me not to check that off because then if you get into an accident, they let you die so they can take your organs. I don't know if that's true, but I feel like if it was true, they wouldn't tell you anyway, so... Regardless, organ donation is heavily regulated in the US. Selling organs for transplants is super illegal, and arrangements for transplants can't be made by for-profit organizations. They must be done by a charity that's registered with the government. Body parts that are sold not for transplants, but say research or educational purposes or things like that, much less regulated. In fact, in the US, there are no federal laws governing this, and very few state laws, and people do make a pretty penny off of this. But we'll get into the exact prices later. I think mostly the context that we've heard about donating your body to science is in like kind of like a joke context. Like, oh hey, you got a stupid brain there. Scientists should take your brain and study how stupid your brain is. So we know how your stupid brain works, we have a better understanding of what it's like to be stupid. The reality though, it's not so much like that. The reality of it is actually kinda sad. You see, whether you're having regular burial or cremation, dealing with the remains of a deceased family member is really expensive, cost prohibitive for some people. And that sometimes is where they wind up in a business called a body broker. It sounds like something out of Shadowrun. Body brokers are mostly for-profit companies that'll give you low-cost or even free cremations in exchange for being allowed to receive the body as a donation. What a lot of people don't realize though, especially because of the use of the term donation, the body isn't merely being given away for research, but rather the body is sold for a lot of money, often chopped up piece by piece. Very lucrative business, especially if you have a way to guarantee the flow of fresh bodies. For example, say if one were to run a body broker out of a funeral home. In 2017, Reuters did an investigation into the shady side of the body broker business. A lot of horrors were uncovered, like the story of a professionally decapitated woman found in the woods. Shells of HIV-infected heads stacked up among thousands of other body parts. Seminars involving cadavers in hotel ballrooms. And their investigation found that only one such facility, a joint body broker / funeral home, existed in the US. The Sunset Mesa Funeral Directors and Donor Services in Montrose, Colorado, owned by Megan Hess, who is in business with her parents, Shirley and Alan Koch. The operation begins in 2006, and pretty quickly all kinds of deceptions can be found. For example, they had these pamphlets for donor services that read, "Be a hero, be an organ donor." Now, technically, I guess, if you're donating your body for research or education or whatever, it is kind of a heroic thing in a sense. I mean, research does save lives, they do have to figure this stuff out somehow, and the future surgeons of the world do need ways to train. But that's clearly not what's being implied by these pamphlets. You get handed one of these things and you think, oh, I'm gonna die, my kidney is gonna save a kid's life. And on the now defunct website for this company, the deception was even more overt, with a splash page talking about life-saving organ transplants and how many people die waiting for a transplant, and linking to a legitimate but completely unrelated charity that actually does facilitate organ donations, Donate Life Colorado. In a later version of the website, the link to Donate Life Colorado is removed, but the statistics about organ transplants would remain, just a blurb added under Megan's portrait that says, "Without donation, there is no research. Without research, there is no cure." So at least now there's some attempt to give a real idea of what the business is about, even though it's still intentionally misleading. Then there's the issue of the fake qualifications. On her website, Megan claimed to have a doctorate in mortuary science, and in her office she proudly displayed her diploma, a doctorate of funeral services from the University of Mortuary Science. But there's no such degree as Doctor of Funeral Services, and there's no institution called the University of Mortuary Science. When she was questioned about this, all references to it were removed from the website. Ultimately, though, that didn't really matter since no degree was actually required to do this to begin with. Interviews with former employees, though, would reveal more damning insights. For example, there was former employee Carrie Escher. Carrie had mentioned conversations with Shirley Koch, who once again was Hess's mother who worked at the funeral home. She had bragged about all the gold teeth that she had pulled from dead bodies, and even showed her the collection of dead people's gold teeth. And that was just a part of the collection. You see, she had sold a bunch of the teeth the year prior, and she bragged about having used that money to take the family out to Disneyland. But believe it or not, a funeral director removing gold from dead people's mouths is not illegal in most states, including Colorado. Another former employee, Jennifer Henderson, told Reuters a similar story in which Hess bragged about making $40 grand in a month selling bodies. She would make similar brags often, and note that none of the employees that were interviewed had anything to do with the body broker business. They were all on the funeral home side of things, but they just couldn't help but brag about all the money they were making. So why was this so profitable? Let's take a look at how the prices break down. A price quote Hess sent to an Arizona medical training lab in 2016 offered torsos for $1,000 each. A pelvis with upper legs went for $1,200, heads for $500, a knee for $250, and a foot for $125, according to a 2013 donor services price list reviewed by Reuters. These transactions would allegedly be done through Hotmail, which sounds incredibly believable based off of a single glance at this woman. That's a Hotmail haircut if I've ever seen one. But of course, it's not illegal to have 80s hair, and once again, it's not illegal to make money selling dead people's body parts. What is illegal though, is to sell the parts of people who did not consent to having their parts sold. And with an unusually high number of complaints regarding suspicious remains being given to people, as well as information garnered from the Reuters interviews, the FBI began to take a look into Hess and her operation. Complaints often revolved around cremated remains received by the families being suspicious. For example, one family was initially told they had lost the remains of their loved one. Eventually, the remains were found, but the family received what they believed to be an unusually light amount of ashes, as well as pieces of a watch, rivets, and a zipper, none of which the deceased was wearing when brought to the funeral home. Perhaps the most damning case, though, is one in which the family actually had their loved one's ashes tested, and they were told that these were not actually ashes. Rather, they had been given a jar of concrete. And in February of 2008, the funeral home would be shut down by the FBI. At the time, not for any of these specific complaints, but because over the course of their investigation, they had found that Hess had not been keeping the cremation and final disposition records that were required by law. Additionally, they had also found that they had disposed of bodies without the proper permits. Note though that in the course of the investigation, state investigators had found bags of dried concrete on the facility. News of what was going on with this funeral home began to spread, and any family who had any dealing with it was quickly struck with the reality of what had been going on. In a piece by IBH Fife for the Colorado Sun, she documents her experience with the funeral home. When her father died, she went there simply because it was the cheapest place to get a cremation. And like others, when she received the cremated remains, she was struck by how light they seemed. At the time though, she just thought maybe that's just how it is. She wasn't really familiar with what it's like to hold a cremated body. But after the news breaks, she starts to look into local online groups and see what people are saying about it. People talking about bodies being sold all over the world, Megan chopping up bodies in the back room with tools from Home Depot. All she's thinking about what might have happened to her father, and then she gets a call from the FBI. The agent gave me the news. Suspecting it is one thing, hearing the details is another. They said she cut him up in the back room of the funeral home, then sold his head, his torso, his arms, his legs below the knees. The only part of him that she didn't sell was his thighs. She cut his frail old body to pieces and pocketed the money. Similar experiences would be recounted by several people interviewed by Sam Tabachnik of the Denver Post. People holding urns of fake ashes, being told by the FBI that their loved ones' bodies were sold against their will, all seeking justice against the people who deceived them and desecrated their families' bodies. Yet Judy Kressler, who after her father died of lung cancer, agreed to donate some of his body for cancer research. She learned that instead of the donation she had agreed to, his whole body was plastinated and sent to Saudi Arabia. Plastination, if you don't know what that means, it's a way of preserving anatomical specimens. Think like the Body Worlds exhibit. So what was actually in the urn that she had received? After getting an analysis done, it turned out that she was holding a mix of some unknown person's ashes and burnt garbage. It wouldn't be until 2 years later though, in 2020, that Hess and her mother were arrested. Although investigators know that they were alleged to have sold body parts when it was unauthorized, and that when it was authorized they sold more than what was agreed to, the official charges wound up being 6 counts of mail fraud and 3 counts of transporting hazardous materials. The reason for this being that some of the body parts they sold were infected with hepatitis and HIV when they had certified that they were disease-free. So essentially, this was all happening more because the people buying the body parts were getting ripped off. In July of 2022, Hess and Koch would go to trial, revealing some of the inner workings of how they would prey on desperate people, with a general callousness towards the whole thing. For example, you got this one 2014 exchange between Hess and a potential buyer. Meeting with Hospice on the 4th, opening the floodgates of donors, Hess wrote to a prospective body part buyer in 2014. They have 4 or 5 deaths a day. Get ready. How about a deal on full embalmed spines? $950?
I'd buy that for $1.
Both Hess and Koch originally pleaded not guilty. Ultimately, though, they would change the guilty pleas in exchange for reduced sentences and some of the charges being dropped. As of now, Hess is looking at as many as 20 years, but as low as 2 years. A result that is extremely dissatisfactory for a lot of the families affected. The families noted a lack of remorse on their part and an unwillingness to take responsibility for their actions. And they also noted the unreputable sorts of places that the bodies wound up at. For example, one of the facilities that a body was sent to got caught thawing out the body in the parking lot with a garden hose. Ultimately, it seems unlikely that the families are actually going to get the result they would like from this, but sentencing as of now is set for November 7th, so we'll see what happens.
On April 5th of 1992, at the climax of WrestleMania 8, it all came crashing down for the Hulkster. A beatdown by Psycho Sid and Papa Shango. But at the last moment, an old friend and rival came to save the day. The Ultimate Warrior. But there was one problem. According to a lot of people, this was not the original Ultimate Warrior. Nowadays, it's really hard for WWE or any other wrestling company to surprise their fans. It seems like the very second any big signings happen or there's any kind of backstage news, the dirt sheets are already reporting on it. If you're a wrestling fan and you want to avoid having things spoiled for you, it can be really hard to avoid them, and you have to be really conscious about the sites you browse. But things were very different in the 80s and 90s. People in the wrestling industry at that point were just a lot more protective of any kind of behind-the-scenes information. But people still had the same desire to know the truth of what's going on behind the scenes and what's going to happen, and because of that, all kinds of crazy rumors and misinformation would pop up. And today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite of one of these rumors, the old story that there were actually 2 Ultimate Warriors. The 2 Ultimate Warriors story was a rumor that was repeated so much throughout the 90s that a lot of people thought it was true. In fact, there are probably a lot of people watching this who did think it was actually the real thing that happened. To everyone else, that sounds completely ridiculous, so how could such an idea spread around all over the world? It's like that S thing that for some reason everybody knew how to draw. One of the biggest contributing factors to this is the confusion around the Ultimate Warrior's disappearance in 1991 and his subsequent return in 1992. You have to figure the Ultimate Warrior was a top star, very over with the fans, and basically groomed to be the successor to Hulk Hogan. Yet after the main event of SummerSlam 1991, he just simply vanished with absolutely no explanation. Of course, it was really confusing for fans that a guy would go from suddenly being the main event of one of the flagship events of the year to suddenly not even at house shows or anything, just gone. The fans could tell that this was not a normal thing, but without the backstage reporting that we have today, they had no idea why. And a lot of people thought he just died. And there's a lot of ideas about what caused him to die, most of them regarding steroid usage. The original Ultimate Warrior died of liver failure due to his steroid usage. Rather than killing off the UW character like he should have, Vince McMahon chose to bring in a bad East Coast actor to play the new and improved Ultimate Warrior. What this guy will do to retain his millions, angry face. Another theory was that his muscles literally exploded. Is the Ultimate Warrior muscle explode myth true? When I was in college, my buddies said that Ultimate Warrior lift Yokozuna and his muscle burst? I guess this is far-fetched, what can you say? The rumor that stuck with me as a then 7-year-old was that he wrestled Earthquake, and when he attempted to do his Gorilla Press Slam, a muscle exploded in his arm, hence why he disappeared. And I'm sure, like me right now, you're picturing his muscles literally bursting like a cartoon character or something, but I was actually surprised to find out that this is kinda something that can happen. There's a condition called rhabdomyolysis, in which injured muscular tissue can break down and cause a dangerous amount of myoglobin to get into your system. This is extremely rare, but if it were to happen, it could cause kidney failure. Of course, the people spreading this rumor weren't thinking of that, though. They were thinking about his muscles bursting and he's flying away like a balloon or something. And then there was the other one that his armbands were so tight that it cut off his blood circulation and he died from that. And then there were some other slightly more reasonable proponents of the two Ultimate Warriors theory who thought, well, maybe he just quit and WWF owned the characters, so they just got a new guy to do it. It's a concept that isn't really that far-fetched, considering that we would see it play out later with the fake Diesel and Razor Ramon. So when the Ultimate Warrior did make his return in 1992, there were a lot of people who were convinced that he looked completely different. The biggest change that a lot of people cited was that although he was still really big, he wasn't as big as he used to be. And there were a few people that said that the new Ultimate Warrior had tiny baby feet. I'm not entirely convinced by the baby feet theory. But hypothetically speaking, say that there were two Ultimate Warriors. Who was the new one then? There actually were a few theories about this. One of the main candidates for being the second Ultimate Warrior was Jim Powers. Jim Powers was a wrestler whose top career highlight was probably being the first guy to lose to Ric Flair in the WWF. He spent most of his time with the company in and out of the tag team division and as an enhancement talent, aka a jobber. But he was definitely a big dude, and according to some people, he did have the look to play the Ultimate Warrior if they wanted him to do that. The only real problem being that he was a lot shorter than the Ultimate Warrior, and also he probably would have had to do a little bit of tweaking to his promo style.
They're relatively new. We haven't seen too much wrestling films on them.
You can feel it, dude!
There was another more plausible candidate to be the second Ultimate Warrior, and it's the guy that most people who believed in the theory thought was doing it. That guy would be the Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich. There were a lot of factors going into why people thought Kerry Von Erich was the new Ultimate Warrior, the most of which being that they did have a really similar look. If we look at this picture of Kerry Von Erich, he basically has an identical physique to the Warrior. They're also the exact same height, they had a very similar haircut. I mean, the face is a little different, you might say. But you know, you throw some face paint on there and a lot of people will be fooled, especially small children. If the WWE were to cast a new Ultimate Warrior in 1992, Kerry Von Erich would be an absolute no-brainer to play the part. And another factor that contributes to the Kerry Von Erich as the Ultimate Warrior theory is that he also disappeared mysteriously around the same time. His last appearance before the Ultimate Warrior returned was at the January 1992 Royal Rumble, where he was eliminated by, who else? Ric Flair. He would not reappear again until slightly after WrestleMania, and even then, only as a curtain jerker on Superstars and house shows. So it would be very easy for someone to have missed those appearances and just assumed he was working as the Ultimate Warrior now. Another factor that would reinforce this rumor was that in 1993, Jim Hellwig, the man behind the Ultimate Warrior, would have his name legally changed to Warrior. And due to the nature of how information would spread in those days, it was like playing a game of telephone where eventually that news turned into you had one Ultimate Warrior who was Jim Hellwig, and then you had the other Ultimate Warrior that was just Warrior. And then, did you ever have a friend tell you that they saw the Ultimate Warrior on WCW? I'm talking about seeing him before, you know, Hulk Hogan imagined seeing him in the mirror and all that business. Well, if they told you that, they had probably seen this guy called Renegade. At the time, WCW had recently signed Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, and they were really going for getting all the old WWF classics. Hulk Hogan started promoting something called the Ultimate Surprise, and they were showing the silhouette of a man who, if you didn't know better, would say he was definitely the Ultimate Warrior. But unfortunately for WCW, they couldn't secure a deal with the Ultimate Warrior, so instead, they just got this dude called the Renegade. They found some guy who vaguely resembled him, threw on some face paint, had him mimic some of the gestures, and here we go, we got our Ultimate Surprise. Nothing really matched up, but I guess there were enough people who believed it, because at some point Jim Hellwig, Ultimate Warrior, did debunk the fact that he in fact wasn't this guy. No, this was not the genuine Ultimate Warrior, this was a male stripper they hired named Richard Wilson. And even though this ploy by WCW did manage to fool a handful of naive kids, I think Perhaps it's the best proof at all that there really is only one Ultimate Warrior. A fact that we'd all be reminded of back in 2014 when the Ultimate Warrior made his triumphant return back to WWE, gave an unforgettable speech that almost sounded like his own eulogy a day before passing away. There really is no doubt that the two Ultimate Warriors theory is complete nonsense, but even still, what happened in 1991 then? It's still obviously not normal that one of their top stars would just mysteriously vanish out of nowhere. Well, there's actually a series of correspondences between Vince McMahon and the Ultimate Warrior that was released a few years ago that tells us what happened. Essentially, the whole thing boils down to a dispute over pay. In a handwritten letter to Vince, Warrior airs his grievances. I want $550,000 released from the monies allotted to me to purchase my home. This will suffice as my WrestleMania 7 payoff, but let it be noted that it is not fair. I meant as much or more to that show as Hulk. I deserve to be paid the same. I know what Hulk will get. 4 days off every other time period except pay-per-view only. I want the same pay cut as Hulk gets on all pay-per-views, Saturday night main events, Friday primetime, house shows, and proof as such. The same pay cut applies to what Hulk has been paid with relationship to past events, WrestleMania 5, 6, 7, i.e. when Hulk was the top draw. I want numbers and proof of monies done on 1/900 Hulk, and likewise same pay cut. Same pay cut on all forms of merchandising. And with the main event to SummerSlam 1991 on the line, Vince McMahon decided to comply with his demands. Dear Jim, this letter is in response to your facsimile to me of July 10th, 1991. You will be paid an aggregate amount of $550,000 for your participation in WrestleMania 7. With the exception of special events only, you will receive 4 days off every other time off period. Your pay rate on house shows will increase to 4 to 5% of the net, effective immediately, with the understanding that no other WWF athlete will be paid at a higher rate. Likewise, no other WWF athlete will be paid at a higher pay rate than you on pay-per-view events. Effective immediately, your royalty rate on all forms of merchandise is to be increased. The specific amount will be determined in writing within 1 week. Your compensation for the Warrior 900 hotline will be identical to that of the Hulk 900 hotline. Likewise, documentation for this will follow in writing within 1 week. I regret the turmoil you've put yourself through and you're agonizing over what you feel is fair compensation. And even though we have a difference of opinion over some of these matters, I am resolved to work with you in the same honest and equitable way that I always have. Furthermore, I would like to express to you my deepest appreciation and admiration for you as a performer, as a member of the WWF family, as a man, and as my friend, Vince. But then once SummerSlam 1991 had passed, Vince McMahon immediately suspended the Ultimate Warrior and told him why. You have become a legend in your own mind. You are certainly entitled to your opinion. However, you are not entitled to vent your feelings by breaching and threatening to breach your contract. In particular, you have breached the contract by failing to appear at matches in which you were scheduled to wrestle without a legitimate excuse, including matches which were scheduled to be televised, failing to cooperate with our booking department, and being rude and abusive to WWF fans. You also threatened that, unless I met your demands, that you were going to stay at home, not appearing at the numerous events which Titan has booked for you as far out as April 1992 on WrestleMania 8, unless and until you were giving all of the perks and pay of Hulk Hogan. Of course, you did not make your threat until Titan had spent tens of thousands of dollars to promote these events and your presence at them. Therefore, when on July 9th, 1991, you threatened to stay at home, thereby not even appearing at Titan's major summer pay-per-view event, SummerSlam, I had no choice but to accede to your exorbitant demands. Paragraph 9.6 of your contract provides that you shall use your best efforts in the ring in the performance of wrestling services for match or other activity. Titan's available remedies for your breach of these obligations are severe but fair. You forfeit any future payments of royalties, and you are prohibited from using or exploiting the persona and characterization of Ultimate Warrior or any substantially similar likeness or name thereof. Note that in all likelihood, Jim Hellwig changing his name to Warrior was because of this stipulation. However, rather than suspend you for the duration of the contract term, September 23rd, 1992, a remedy which Titan has under paragraph 12 of the contract, I am temporarily suspending you from bookings. So there you have it. A dispute about money was ultimately what led to one of wrestling's longest, most persistent, most ridiculous urban legends.
This man spent tens of thousands of dollars on plastic surgery to look like, you probably already guessed it because he looks so much like him, David Beckham. You know, if David Beckham was a Pidgeotto. Meet Jack Johnson, not to be confused with the singer-songwriter, a man whose plastic surgery story has many twists and turns, treating his facial features like an RPG custom character spec slider. For today's episode of Tales from the Internet, we'll be looking at Jack's several year-long journey. I've always thought that people judge those who get plastic surgery a little bit harshly. To me, there's very little that distinguishes it from just extreme body mods. At the same time though, there are those who allow plastic surgery to consume them, never feeling quite satisfied with what they've got, always chasing the thing that'll bring them the perfection they seek and always falling short of that goal. Such is the tale of one Jack Johnson. He first comes to internet fame at the ripe age of 19 years old, in September of 2016. At the time, several outlets reported on the story of the teen from Nottingham who had spent prices ranging from £15,000 to £20,000 on cosmetic procedures since the age of 17 to look like David Beckham, and who quite obviously looked nothing like David Beckham. As some pointed out, he more closely resembled a white Kim Jong-un than David Beckham. In fact, if you look at the before pictures, I feel like he kinda looked more like David Beckham before he got any work done. The procedures at this point included teeth veneers, lip fillers, cheek fillers, eyebrow lift, Botox in his forehead, and tan injections. I didn't even know tan injections were a thing, but apparently there's some people who go even further with it. He also had several more procedures planned for the future, as well as copying David Beckham's tattoos. He also claimed to change his hair whenever Beckham did. This way he would always look as close to him as possible. And while Beckham did in fact rock a Pidgeotto cut for a while, the thing is, Jack has a very pronounced widow's peak. It would keep him from ever matching it entirely, which is why he had stated that he was going to go to Poland to get a hair transplant. And then of course, there's the matter of the physique. David Beckham, who has spent most of his adult life as an athlete at the highest levels, has an extremely chiseled physique. Jack, on the other hand, does not. But Jack hoped to address this with gastric bypass surgery. So how did all this get started anyway? The fixation on Beckham supposedly begins in 2008. It was at this time that an 11-year-old Jack attended Wimbledon with his school on a class trip. During the trip, he happened to see David Beckham out with his son Brooklyn. For that moment, he knew what he had to do. I've always wanted to look like him because there isn't a person on this planet who can say he is ugly. Jack was actually not a fan of soccer at all. He was just attracted to David Beckham's celebrity lifestyle, which was corroborated by comments by his older brother Aaron. Outspoken Aaron from Nottingham exclusively revealed, he is a twat. He really is. He wants to be famous and wants to be the next star. I know it is harsh, but I am just being honest. He has gone over the top. There is no stopping him. He needs to calm it down because he thinks he is a law to himself. He is in cloud cuckoo land. And although the brother's comments seem a bit harsh, Jack's own comments make it seem like, this is kind of in line with the truth of it. I want to be on the friends list of Nicki Minaj, Beyonce, Drake, and Katie Price. One day, Simon Cowell will be picking up the phone to me. And as it turns out, that week the fame he was looking for came to him, although perhaps for unexpected reasons. So, Jack was unemployed at the time. So how was he paying for all of this? According to the most common media narrative, he was on government benefits and using his welfare on plastic surgery, instead of, the source of necessities it's supposed to be for. So there you go, as sensationalistic as a story already is that you got this guy getting plastic surgery to look like David Beckham and he looks like nothing like David Beckham. On top of that, now you can say, hey, this guy, he's spending your tax money to look like this. It culminates in an interview on the show This Morning, which shines a bit more light on how Jack actually is. And it's pretty interesting. Like, knowing that this guy is definitely seeking fame, you might expect him to be someone who's, just kind of trolling for attention. But in the interview, he actually does come across surprisingly self-aware. Like, he knows he doesn't look like David Beckham.
Like, obviously, I know I don't look like him, you know what I mean? I'm not that stupid.
And he knows he's not in good shape.
Obviously, I'm not slim like him, I ain't got the six-pack, but I do want a gastric band.
Which, by the way, the doctors did reject his application for a gastric band. One of the more poignant moments of the interview is when he's asked what happens when eventually he does reach his goal of looking like David Beckham.
Do you ever worry that after doing all of this, spending all this money, putting your health at risk, that actually maybe you should just work on you and learning to really love the person that you are now?
I know what you mean, but not really. I'm happy looking like David Beckham, being like David Beckham. I want his lifestyle.
You can hear the desperation in his voice, as if he's thought about this question before, and now it sounds like he's trying to convince himself that this is what will make everything right. And it kind of makes you feel for the dude a bit. Because even if it's not as extreme, there's probably been some moment where you thought, oh, if only I had this specific thing turn out a certain way, everything would be fine in my life. And it's just never really like that. Eventually they get to the burning controversy though, the benefits.
You're unemployed, you're spending your benefits on...
That's the thing, I just want to confirm, I ain't spent one bit of my money on my benefits. I've took out loans and I'm in debt.
But how are you going to pay that back?
You could tell by his immediate reaction that he was annoyed by the claim that he was funding all this with government benefits. At that point, he was already £19,000 in debt, and needed by his estimate $30,000 more to finish the job. Which honestly, it's wild to me that an unemployed 19-year-old can be given loans like this. And the earliest reporting on him did mention that he funded all this with loans. But as outlets latched onto the benefits thing more, that narrative started to disappear. And it was often paired with political commentators who were like, hey, you see this? This is why we gotta cut back on those benefits. Granted, he did have some wild ideas on what should be covered by the NHS, such as lip fillers. Incredibly, the teenager also wants some plastic surgery procedures like lip fillers to be free on the NHS. He added, I think lip fillers should be on the NHS. I've had arguments about this with people on the internet. I understand there are other things out there on the NHS that are important. I understand, for example, people who want a baby should have IVF treatment on the NHS, but other people need work on their lips. Not to mention he would in fact get into it with people online over the benefits. When one Twitter user questioned why Jack had been able to splash his benefits on beauty treatments, he replied, because I'm fabulous. A few months later though, Jack would come clean with a startling admission. It was all just a stunt. He never spent that money, he was never on benefits, never wanted to look like David Beckham, and his friends and family were all in on it. It was all just a stunt so he could appear on This Morning. He came clean to everything in a Facebook post saying that he just wanted to be liked, but ultimately the sudden fame made everything worse. Fame doesn't solve your problem. It actually made my problems worse. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing having free things sent to you, or getting invited to celebrity events, or being paped. But behind the cameras, I was living in a fantasy. But ultimately, this all just makes what happens next even more confusing. He would spend a significant amount of time afterwards finding himself. And here's what he found. In June of 2018, 2 years after his original rise to infamy, and 1 year after the admission that it was all fake, he's back at it again. Okay, yeah, he didn't want to look like David Beckham after all. Now, he wanted to look like David Beckham's son, Brooklyn Beckham. David is obviously very attractive, but he's getting older now and I want a younger, fresher look. Brooklyn is more in the limelight, and now when I go to my surgeon or beauty therapist, I take a picture of him. He commented that looking back on that TV interview, he thought he looked like Mr. Potato Head, but he was happy with his current look, which cost him £9,000 more, and involved thread facelifts, derma rollers, and something called vampire facials. Apparently they extract blood from your arm and put that blood into your face. Because you know, the arm is where you get that real good blood. No wonder they grew that one guy a new wiener on it. Still, tens of thousands of pounds in debt, Jack was homeless, couch surfing, and having his lifestyle funded entirely by 5 sugar daddies. Sugar daddies who also treated him to fancy meals and designer bags. I don't know, to me 5 guys seems like it might be a bit much to handle. But he clarifies, I don't have to do anything intimate with them. I just go out for luxury dinners and attend exclusive events by their side. It's a simple transaction. They're not really my friends. Despite how sad that sounds, he asserted that he was 100% happy, and that everyone who thought otherwise was jealous or a hater. When I tell people what I do, they always have bad opinions. But as sugar babies are the ones getting driven around in amazing cars. If people want to moan, let them, because I'm the one who's winning. A year later, things would take an even more unexpected turn. It was in February of 2019 that Jack would come to another realization. He didn't want to look like Brooklyn Beckham. Now, he wanted to look like Victoria Beckham. And you won't believe how he came to this realization. She said, when I was 8, I was watching Jerry Springer's show, and saw a transgender woman on there who had a sex change, so from there on I knew one day I'm going to have the operation. Everyone knows I'm transgender and want to look like Victoria Beckham now in my hometown, and some people ain't so nice, but I don't care, because I have my happy ever after now. And also at this point, Jack, who had stated his intention to have his name legally changed to Victoria, had fully embraced his reputation as a person with the British public footing his bill. Altogether, it's going to cost the taxpayers about £18,000 for my sex change and facelift. Jack's family was claimed to be supportive, with his sister graciously offering to pay for his boob job, and his mother previously unhappy with his choice to look like David Beckham, knowing that this was his truth all along. And with this revelation, there's probably some of you watching this who are like, hey, it's kind of messed up that you spent this whole video misgendering and dead-naming this person. Well, for those of you thinking that, you're gonna like the next part even less. But at this point, you might have guessed where this is going. Yeah, that too was a publicity stunt. There was no sex change, no Victoria Beckham, no memories of Jerry Springer, and Jack would make the news one last time in March of 2020, with what he really wanted now. A new set of veneers to look like David Beckham once again, paid for by the NHS. And he wanted the NHS to pay for it because, as he said, people without legs get new legs. At this point, he was calling himself the Benefits King. And it's more over the top than ever. It's like, he's fully taken on this wrestling heel style persona. He talks about how much better life is on benefits than working a job. How he just spent thousands of pounds on clothes and a new Louis Vuitton bag. How he's addicted to plastic surgery and his dream surgery is to get 4 ribs removed. And since the NHS had refused his veneers, he opened up an ultimately unsuccessful GoFundMe for the public to pay for his veneers, specifically to have this procedure done at a Turkish clinic known as the Comfort Zone. And he wraps up this final public spectacle with these comments. Jack also said that he is known for being the guy who spends thousands to look like David Beckham, and receives hateful phone calls and once had his windows put through. When asked if he would ever stop claiming benefits, Jack said, "I will always claim benefits. I'm, after all, the benefit king." I can't help but think to that moment in 2017 when he made that Facebook post admitting that it was all just a stunt. I can't help but think that was some kind of turning point. Perhaps the story of him getting all that plastic surgery on taxpayer money was true, and maybe he just made that post to get rid of some of the heat and it didn't quite work out. Or maybe that post was the only time he was really telling the truth. But then, since that post kind of went under the radar, maybe he felt that there was simply no shaking the reputation he had for himself now, so he might as well double down. If that's the case, there never seemed to be any real payoff for him. Some of the articles about him mention an agent and TV deals being in the works, but none of these ever came to fruition. If that's the case, it makes me think that perhaps each of these stunts that he did about a year apart, maybe those were pushes to try and make a deal happen, but none of the projects he envisioned for this character that he created ever really materialized. It's a story that's very clearly fraught with lies, but at the same time, in some parts of it, it's kind of hard to tell where the truth begins and the lies end. But in any case, that's the story of the Benefits King.
In February of 2003, a man named Carlin Langley went for a fabulous night out at a gay bar in the heart of New York City. He was having a great time when suddenly he met a long-haired, bearded fellow who introduced himself as Mike Portnoy, aka the drummer of the band Dream Theater. And like some of you, I imagine, Carlin Langley had no idea who Mike Portnoy was, and he had no idea what Dream Theater was. However, if you do know who Mike Portnoy is, then you know that he is considered by many people to be one of, if not the greatest rock drummer in the world. And Mike spent no time telling Carlin Langley about all the things that Dream Theater had been up to. He told me he'd just come back from Japan where he'd signed an endorsement deal with a drum manufacturer. So sure, even though Carlin Langley had no idea who Mike Portnoy was or what Dream Theater was, how often do you get the chance to hook up with a bona fide rock star? So Carlin took Mike back to his place where, according to the New York Post, they were intimate. Then they fell asleep, and when Carlin woke up, he found no trace of Mike. He also found no trace of his wallet, his keys, or his cell phones. Realizing that his apartment had just been ransacked by Mike Portnoy, the drummer of Dream Theater, Carlin Langley got on the phone with his credit card company, who informed him that Mike Portnoy had already spent $1,000 on his card. And Carlin Langley was not alone in having this sort of experience with the drummer from Dream Theater. Between February and March of 2003, the internet became flooded with stories of gay men who were swindled by Mike Portnoy. Here's what one of his victims had to say about the con. I wanted to somehow get word to Mike that there's a guy in NYC who is pretending to be Mike, picking guys up at bars, restaurants, and on the street, convincing them that he's Mike Portnoy, the world-famous drummer from Dream Theater. He has all their music CDs, knows every beat of every song, and the words, and has Mike's schedule both past and present down to a T. He says that he's been struggling with his sexuality lately, thinking back to a molestation when he was 14, and has decided to give it another try to see if he can finally find happiness. After convincing them of who he is, and of his sincerity, they get it on, and at some point when they aren't paying attention, he steals whatever he can find from them. From me, it was my wallet, IDs, credit cards, ATM cards, social security card, etc. This impersonator's con was so good that he had actually managed to initially fool Chris Cafferty of the band Sabotage. And after he realized that he too had been taken in by this guy, Chris Cafferty posted an update. Hello. It is April and snowing. The world hates America, and there is a Mike Portnoy imposter running around New York City. You may have noticed that I removed my post about Mike. It was for good reason. Although I have seen band photos and played festivals with Dream Theater, I never really knew their faces. My friend called me and told me that Mike wanted to say hello. This was last week. A few days later, in the city, I was introduced to who was supposed to be Mike. The guy had the whole bar fooled, me included. He obviously did a whole bunch of research on Mike and his career and family. He apparently had stolen his wallet and cell phone. He had his ID, so who was to know? And what really helped this guy fool Chris Cafferty at first was that he just had such a good command of the details. The guy knew very serious business details and family matters of Mike's. He was even recognized by people as Mike Portnoy when I was with him. He held phone conversations on my phone with supposed mutual friends. It was a pretty good act. The ID, the Rolex, the drum companies, the phone calls. The guy was pretty convincing. Everyone in the bar was calling him Mike and buying him drinks and talking about his band. He even knew that we played a show together in Sao Paulo. Cafferty started to get a little suspicious, however, when he heard Mike Portnoy play the drums. I got into a room to jam with this guy last week and knew something was up. He was still hammered, but he was not a good drummer. I went online to Mike's site, and we noticed that although he looked similar, he was scrawny and had a space between his teeth that did not exist on Mike's photos. Chris Cafferty also wanted to make one thing very clear. Apparently, the guy was trying to pick up guys too. I assure you that he was not doing this in my case. I think I am pretty obvious in my ways. For a period of time, this Mike Portnoy imposter was becoming so prolific that he started to get a reputation around the city. Here's another instance recounted by Adam Newman, a stand-up comedian who worked his encounter with the fake Mike Portnoy into a bit.
This guy drunkenly stumbled up to me and some friends. My friend goes, "What's your name?" And he goes, "The drummer from Dream Theater." That's how he introduced himself. He was so drunk, he pulled a bottle of pills, not out of his pocket, out of his pants. They were in the front of his pants, in his waistline, no cap on them. Take some down. My friend goes, "What are those?" And he goes, "Something bad." And I'm on YouTube looking at drum tutorials and concert footage, and I'm finding the drummer from Dream Theater, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, that's not the guy from last night at all. It wasn't the drummer from Dream Theater. It was just a guy saying he was a drummer from Dream Theater. And I told some friends the story. 3 friends of mine said, that same thing happened to me.
So this imposter basically did his thing for well over a month until on April 1st of 2003, he was finally caught in a sting that Mike Portnoy, the real Mike Portnoy, described as being a scene out of NYPD Blue. The capture of the fake Mike Portnoy begins with a musician named Ray Freeman who happened to be hanging out at a bar in the West Village called Finally Fred's. Ray needed a drummer to play with his band Block 16, and obviously he was ecstatic when Mike Portnoy agreed to do it. And at the same time, Mike Portnoy got Ray and the rest of his band to give him a place to stay using a sob story. He told us that his mother was dying of cancer, his wife was divorcing him, and that Dream Theater had cancelled its tour because of the war, so I kind of felt sorry for him. The ruse, however, quickly fell apart when it came time to actually play the drums. You can have all kinds of fake IDs and details about a person's life memories, but you're just not gonna sit behind a drum kit and imitate the performance of a person who is considered by many to be one of the best drummers in the world. It's just not gonna happen. And in Ray Freeman's words, he sounded worse than my grandmother. And that's when everything started to really click. He noticed that the tattoos on this guy didn't quite match up with Mike Portnoy's actual tattoos. He noticed that he had things missing from his apartment, and he looked online and he saw that there were reports of an imposter Mike Portnoy going around. So this guy calls the police and they make a plan to finally catch this guy. What they did was they had Ray Freeman pick up the fake Mike Portnoy in his car while he's on the phone with the real Mike Portnoy to coordinate where they're gonna wind up. They drive back to Ray's apartment in Queens, the police show up, and they get the fake Mike Portnoy, who is still at this moment insisting that he really is Mike Portnoy. It turns out that the imposter was a man named Anthony Mendez, who's pictured here, and unfortunately, this is really the only picture that you can find of him nowadays. He was charged with criminal impersonation and grand larceny with $100,000 bail. And with all that, you would think that this would be the last we'd hear of him, but it wasn't! Anthony Mendez once again started up his fake Mike Portnoy scam in 2006. Mike Portnoy received an email from a concerned fan that he shared on his message board thinking, here we go again. This guy came over to my house the other day claiming to be Mike from Dream Theater. This guy looked like a wreck. He was clearly on some heavy drugs. I just couldn't believe that it would actually be Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater. You must be thinking this is a joke, but it's not. The guy maintained that he was Mike Portnoy the whole time he was hanging out at my house. I totally would have assumed this guy was lying, but he knew everything about the band. Tours, album covers, and their meanings, etc. Please tell me this guy was an imposter. I'd hate to think that the real-life Mike Portnoy is a drugged-out wreck. And of course, having dealt with this before, Mike Portnoy was sent in a bit of a panic, worrying about his family's safety, his reputation, but thankfully for him, this was the last time it appears that anybody had ever heard from the Mike Portnoy imposter again. So what actually did happen to this guy? Did he get caught again? Did he turn over a new leaf? I mean, if you ask me, considering the risky lifestyle this guy had and the heavy drug usage, it's very likely that Anthony Mendez is simply no longer with us. But we don't know for sure.
Imagine going through all the trouble of having a baby. You wait around 9 long months till it finally pops out and then boom, ugly baby. There's many such cases. And sure, the ladies that want designer babies can just head down to the Burlington Sperm Factory, browse through the catalog and find their favorite flavor of 6'5", Dolph Lundgren, Diesel, Giga Chad, and have their uterus feast on elite baby batter so that they can pop out the next phase of human evolution. But if you're a guy, you might be thinking that your options for having a non-garbage test tube baby are kinda limited. Well, you'd be wrong. What if I told you that there actually was some mail-order eugenics for the fellas? A man named Ron Harris has you covered with his website where you can browse through images of supermodels and, if you so choose, for a reasonable fee, receive their eggs for you to nut on. I mean, alright, I guess I'm oversimplifying the science a bit. It's not like she's the Little Mermaid. Because the Little Mermaid you would hook up by jizzing on her eggs. Sorry to ruin your fantasy, but she's a fish and that's just how it works. So for today's episode of Tales from the Internet, let's take a look at Ron's Angels. By the time 1999 came around, photographer Ron Harris had seen it all. A storied career of working with some of the most beautiful women around the world. In both still photography and, perhaps most famously, the 80s erotic workout video Aerobicize, which gained popularity with its airings on Showtime and left many Gen Xers with some of their most cherished formative memories. The unfortunate thing about models, though, in the rare case where they're actually getting paid, it's often not enough to make ends meet. They didn't have OnlyFans back in those days. And that's when Ron came up with the brilliant idea. You see, beautiful women have beautiful babies, and these models aren't planning on getting pregnant anytime soon, so why not sell their eggs? Ron sets up an auction website for it, takes a cut of the profits, and everybody wins. Thus, the website Ron's Angels is born. Welcome to ronsangels.com. the only website that provides you with the unique opportunity to bid on eggs from beautiful, healthy, and intelligent women. That's right, on ronsangels.com, with starting bids ranging between $15,000 and $150,000, you too can bid on your very own supermodel eggs. Each model had a page with a profile including a photo of their statistics such as age, blood type, and height, their parents' ages, race, and why they were doing this. Some of your lovely egg donor options included Model 117, a 25-year-old student who is selling her eggs to afford college and facilitate her acting career. She has a 3.0 grade average and loves animals. Model 88, a 20-year-old Romanian model selling her eggs so she can move to the USA. Model number 10, a 29-year-old pop artist selling her eggs to facilitate her career in pop art. Buyer beware though, her breasts are not real. At some point, Ron also expanded the business to include a sperm donor. Model 89, aka Perfect Health Heterosexual Businessman. And if you felt like your goods were up to snuff, you could take a picture, send over some basic information, and apply to be a donor for Ron yourself. It's the kind of thing that sounds like it's probably illegal, but you're kinda not sure, and it's also the early days of the internet, so you're never really sure about anything when it comes to legality. At that time, basically everything is uncharted territory. But just to keep things safe, Ron made sure to indicate in the disclaimer on his website that this was merely a venue for the sale, and not a place where actual medical procedures were being facilitated. You're not just gonna get an envelope full of eggs in the mail from Ron. The site gets a ton of attention really quickly just for being such an absurd, outrageous concept. Over 5 million views in the first week. And then on October 23rd of 1999, a journalist for the New York Times named Carrie Goldberg blows the lid off the whole operation. On web, models auction their eggs to bidders for beautiful children. The topics of high fees for egg donations was already a bit of a hot topic at this time. There had only just recently been a controversy where college newspapers were filled with ads soliciting egg donations for $50,000. In the article, she talks about the disgust this website caused among fertility specialists. Mr. Harris's melding of Darwin-based eugenics, Playboy-style sensibilities, and eBay-type commerce struck some infertility specialists as the most worrying sign yet of where the partly unregulated field of assisted reproduction may be going. Shelley Smith, director of the Egg Donor Program, a center in Los Angeles, said, "It's frightening and horrible. And the worst part for me is to think there might be something worse still beyond our imagination. It seems to escalate, and ever since the internet, it seems to snowball more rapidly. The depersonalization of people and selling of eggs." Carrie Goldberg also spoke to Ron Harris himself, who defended his website, saying that the criticisms were basically just a case of political correctness run amok. The way he puts it, since all women are not the same, the cost of their eggs should be based on their perceived value. The article continues the discussion with experts based on the ethics of the situation as well as the usual protocol for this sort of thing. They note that typically an egg donor would be selected based on her traits and then paid between $2,500 and $5,000 to cover her time and discomfort. And other doctors noted that when it comes to this, people aren't necessarily guaranteed to get what they're paying for. Intelligent parents aren't necessarily going to have intelligent children. And good-looking parents aren't necessarily going to have good-looking children. Can you imagine paying $150,000 for supermodel babies and then they just pop out on their uggos? Or even worse, can you imagine being the disappointingly ugly baby? Kinda awkward. As more outlets picked up on the story though, suspicion started to arise that this was a hoax. In part due to the fact that clicking around on the website would eventually lead you to Ron's porn site. A porn site that included pictures of several of the models that were supposedly selling their eggs. And with that in mind, I can't help but wonder if this was originally conceived as some kind of a fetish thing. A lot of how the site is made reminds me a bit of those cannibal roleplay sites that I came across in the Armin Maivis video. The profiles with all of the statistics of the women and the application process. Perhaps there are people who got off to the idea of selling their eggs to the highest bidder. In any case, people monitoring this website also noticed that none of these bids ever seemed to go up. Although as the site continued to receive negative attention, several of the models asked to be removed from it. So really, what was the deal here? A few people raised the idea that this website was merely a publicity stunt to drive traffic to his actual business, the porn site. And indeed, it turned out that Ron Harris did have a history of trying all different ways to promote his various porn sites. Although it was typically less imaginative stuff like spamming news groups until his sites got put into spam blockers. And when you look into the story, pretty much anywhere you look will declare that it is a hoax, but Ron himself never conceded this. To the very end, he maintained that this was a legitimate auction site. And he also said that his experience as a photographer uniquely qualified him for this line of work. What are my credentials, Harris boasts? I am a renowned fashion photographer and director for 40 years. And in case you doubted his past experience, he adds, I have been an Arabian horse breeder. He also declared that due to his specialized knowledge on this topic, he had spent the last 20 years working on a book that would detail his theories of genetics. Unfortunately, the book never came out. Two of the models that worked on the site also spoke to reporters and claimed that yes, it was real. One said that she wanted the money for college, and another said that she wanted it so she wouldn't be dependent on men. In response to his website, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine even published a report on the commodification of human egg donations. In the report, the ASRM urges that such high fees should not be paid for eggs, as it might cause women to discount the small but real health effects. It also urges against paying more for specific traits, referring to the practice as positive eugenics. So what do I think? Was it a hoax? Kind of. What I think happened is that Ron probably heard about the college newspaper scandal, the one where people were selling eggs for $50,000, and it got the gears turning a little bit. Knowing what a controversy this stirred up, he saw the opportunity for publicity, and it worked. I doubt that any actual sales were made through this website. But that being said, hypothetically, if a serious buyer were to come through this website and attempt to buy these eggs, I think he would have done it. Considering that it wasn't illegal and the plan was always to have the separate medical arrangements made off the website, why the fuck wouldn't he do it? But that being said, I also can't help but think that on some level, Ron was trying to make a point through satire on his website. You look at some of the things he wrote on there and it's just dripping with it. Beauty is its own reward. This is the first society to truly comprehend how important beautiful genes are to our evolution. Just watch television and you will see that we are only interested in looking at beautiful people. From the network anchors to supermodels that appear in most advertisements, our society is obsessed with youth and beauty. As our society grows older, we inevitably look to youth and beauty. The billion-dollar cosmetic industry, including cosmetic surgery, is proof of our obsession with beauty. It is not our intention to suggest that we make a super society of only beautiful people. This site simply mirrors our current society, in that beauty usually goes to the highest bidder. And my belief that Ron was engaging in social commentary with this website is furthered by a statement that he made in an interview with an old porn website, 4porn.net. In 1981, Ron operated a photo studio in La Brea Boulevard. After taking aerobics classes to stay in shape, he created TV's first aerobics exercise program, Aerobicize. It premiered on Showtime 7/4/81. There are all these beautiful girls on a rotating turntable that turned all the boys on. People magazine called me the King of Jiggle. Is this man trying to turn the country on or get the country in shape? A couple of people called me the father of erotica. I never came to terms with the erotica part. I would not go into pornography. In my head, I am not a pornographer. I'm an artist. I have no doubt in my mind that a man like this, a pornographer that fancies himself an artist, might have been attempting to criticize our society's obsession with beauty by taking it to an extreme end, much in the way that Jonathan Swift attempted to criticize the treatment of the poor by suggesting cannibalism. Or maybe it was just a porn site. In any case, Ron Harris passed away in 2017, so I guess we'll never know for sure.
To drink from the fountain of youth and experience immortality, to never age again, has been one of humanity's greatest missions since the dawn of recorded history. Ponce de Leon, Alexander Bogdanov, Thomas A. Donaldson, many names throughout history have tried and failed to achieve immortality. Yet there's one man whose legend, whose discoveries have been lost to the ether of Web 1.0 along with GeoCities and that skull animated GIF that turns into smoke. That man's name? Alex Chiu, inventor of the magnetic immortality rings. Well, guess what? Alex Chiu is back.
Doctors will hate me, okay? Doctors always hate me.
Back in the 90s on my 56K modem, I was convinced that you could find absolutely anything on the internet. You know, like not just like movies and songs and whatnot, but anything, including the secrets of the universe. And at some point around that time, I had become obsessed with the idea of immortality. So what's a 90s kid to do besides hop on Lycos and search for how to become immortal? If you did search for such a thing in the 90s, chances are that you came across a website, alexchiu.com, the home of Chinese inventor Alex Chiu and his amazing immortality device. Well, as it turns out, Alex Chiu's website is still there in all of its late 90s web design glory. There's his website exactly as I remember it from the 90s, a Chinese technology that the white men just can't beat. Alex Chiu makes sure that no matter how hard you white folks try, you will never beat the Chinese in medical technology. Period. I created physical immortality and also invented a machine that can get rid of all illnesses and diseases to create an incorruptible superhuman that you white folks can only see on sci-fi movies. Chinese were the best inventors in the world, and now they shall take that title once more. And there's Alex Chiu. That's the picture I remember from back in the 90s. I wonder if he still looks like that now, you know, considering that his device prevents aging, right? He should still look just like that, perhaps with like a more time-appropriate haircut, but we'll see. It should work because, in Alex's own words, this is the most important invention in human history. So the other day I was wondering whatever happened to Alex Chiu and his amazing immortality device and all his other inventions, and as it turns out, Alex Chiu now has a YouTube channel. Well, actually, he's had one for about the past 10 years, but the past couple of months he's become much more active. And I'm very, very happy that he's become much more active, as you shall soon find out.
Hey, what's up? This is Alex Chiu.
I'm not gonna lie, it's strangely exciting to see this guy in motion, in the flesh, after seeing that website so many years ago.
My partner, Christian, was telling me, hey, you should make some more videos, to show people, I mean, this is not a joke. I mean, you're the inventor of physical immortality. So I'm 46 now. In 3 years and a half, okay? 3 years and a half, I'll be 50. Hey, if I still look like this when I'm 50-year-old, hey, you better believe in what I say.
If he still looks like this at age 50. Now, let's take a look at this guy. He looks like a 46-year-old Asian guy. Now that some time has passed, though, we can kind of take a look back on Alex to see how well his rings work. Alright, so here's Alex at 46.
This is Alex Chiu.
Alex at 38.
This is Alex Chiu.
And Alex in his late 20s. Now, you tell me, I kind of, like I said, the Asian guys, they age a little bit better. But I feel like he's still kind of looking a little older, kind of starting to look like a foot a little bit. Yeah, hairline's receding, he's kind of got that old man floppy neck. But the plot thickens. You see, in 2010, Alex was arrested for his immortality device.
Anyway, today I just want to tell you about... By the way, I'm 46-year-old, okay? Well, anyway, hold on. I always want to show off my belly a little bit. Hold on a minute.
Wait. He's going to show us the belly before he talks? I thought dessert was supposed to come after the main course.
Anyway, let me show off my belly a little bit. Do I look like I'm 46-year-old, or you decide? I don't know.
Surely it's not that amazing for a 46-year-old man to have a flat stomach. I mean, we're living in a post-John Bastow fitness-made simple 8-minute abs world.
Let me... deep breath. Anyway, you decide.
Is this how far we've come as a society, that simply not being fat is so amazing that it can only be explained by fucking magic rings. Wait a second. You're not wearing your fucking magic rings, Alex. What the fuck are you doing? You're gonna die, dude. We need your beautiful Chinese mind to fucking save humanity and make us immortal for fucking ever. This is why he's looking fucking old now, because you see, he's not even wearing his own immortality rings. What? He should be in jail for suicide because he's clearly killing himself by not wearing those fucking rings.
I was arrested in 2009 or something. I was arrested in 2009. I refused to give out 6 refunds, okay? And then I got arrested. You know what? It's my fault. You know what? Okay, I'm gonna come clean. Okay, it's my fault. I did not give these people refunds. You know why? Because I gave people physical immortality. You understand?
I'll give you one thing. This guy, he's not a bullshit artist. He's definitely, whatever he's selling, he believes in it. He is a true believer. Like, what the hell is it about guys named Alex anyway?
You know why?
Shit crap!
I gave people physical immortality. You understand? Fuck you!
Got that, Hillary? Sick of your crap.
Big fucking deal. I gave them physical immortality, okay?
Do you understand that? Get it through your hands!
Wait a second, let's take a look at that last clip. What the fuck was that behind him? Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys.
My past life, okay, I used to be a German. I used to fight for the Nazis.
He now believes himself to be a reincarnated Nazi.
Oh yeah, you like my new flag? You like my new well.
Oh yeah, it's just, you know, my little Nazi flag back there, you know, what do you guys think? It's pretty cool, right? May I have a little Nazi flag yet?
Some people said it looks like a German flag, but, well, it's just, I don't know. I always believed that I used to be German. I believe I used to live, back in the Nazi times. This is actually my name, Chiu. You know, this is actually a Chinese character. I don't know. Hey, I hope you guys like my flag.
I don't know, it's pretty cool.
You know, and the Jews, they're just a bunch of strange people. You know, they wear you know, strange clothing, and then they form a community. They're like, you know, to most people, it's like Jews are just a bunch of strange people that love money.
Immortality, guys. Not even once. 2018 is coming to an end, and much to the chagrin of people who somehow find their way to my Sinbad Genie movie videos, I'm still alive. I can't be absolutely certain why I'm still alive, but I might have a little secret up my sleeve. Come, let me show it to you. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, or if you just went through my back catalog, you probably know that one of the first episodes of Tales from the Internet was about a man named Alex Chiu. If you haven't watched this video already, I suggest you do before watching this one, but if you don't feel like it, let me summarize it for you. Alex Chiu is a Chinese inventor who makes magnetic rings that he claims grant you immortality. He sells these wings on his gloriously Web 1.0 website. This is an invention that he claims to be the most important invention in all of human history. He's so protective of this important invention that he actually allowed himself to be arrested over refusing refunds. Oh yeah, and also he believes that he's a reincarnated Nazi, and he made himself his own custom flag to celebrate the heritage of his past life. And that brings us to today. Well, actually, a year ago. You see, shortly after the release of my original Alex Chiu video, Alex saw it. He was so thrilled about my video that he actually offered to send me a free pair of immortality rings. Oh my god. Let me send you a pair of rings. Love your video. And that surprised me because this was the very first time that a person I made a video about actually contacted me. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking this guy is like, he's gonna send me anthrax or something. Do I really want to accept this offer? But when putting myself in life or death situations, I often consider whether or not the headline reporting my death would be funny. And you know what? YouTuber killed by immortality rings works for me, so I said fuck it, send them over. So Alex puts me in touch with his partner Christian, who sends the rings over along with a handwritten note. Hi Justin, thank you again for your support. Christian. And there's some Chinese writing there. I don't know what that says. If any of you guys can read Chinese, or I know there's like Mandarin and Cantonese, whatever that is, if you guys can read that, I appreciate the help. And these right here, let me make sure they're in focus, are the rings. They have a very strong magnet. You can see I gotta put a little bit of little bit of weight into it if you want to put the make the same sides go together. Wait, check this trick out. It kinda did it. I can also use one ring to take off the other ring. I wish I still had a CRT monitor. In addition to the rings and the handwritten note, I was also sent a pamphlet. And this pamphlet has a big note at the top. The immortality rings and foot braces do not function properly without Gorgeous Pill. There's an upsell. So what is Gorgeous Pill? It's a pill that makes you gorgeous. Thank you for purchasing Gorgeous Pill. This pill enhances the performance of the immortality rings or the foot braces like 50 times or something. And if you really want to kick things up a notch, you can get another pill called Chi Flush, which will apparently get rid of tumors and cure all handicaps. I'm gonna have to send this over to young Crip. But of course, nothing worth having comes easy, and Gorgeous Pill and Super Chi Flush are not without side effects. Please note, natural products can and often will cause short-term side effects, called the Myung-Kyun effect, and this is perfectly normal process. This is your body's harmful effects reveling against new goodness entering into your system. Short-term symptoms should disappear in 3 to 5 days' time. And I found it kind of alarming that it says that they're side effects, but it doesn't tell you what the side effects are. I'm assuming it has something to do with violently shitting yourself, but I don't know yet, so I looked up the Myung-Hun effect, and I found this website, belonging to the Lee Young-Jun Clinic of Korean Medicine. This site says, in explaining the intensifying process of diseases, when a chronic disease is being cured, its process goes back the exact same process that the disease had occurred. In other words, when a human body changes from a state of disease to a state of health, through treatment, the chronic disease disappears and the body regains its normality. In this process, new symptoms occur and the body experiences a rewinding process, which relays the same process that the disease had intensified backwards. Dr. Harry explains this as the law of cure, enticed by the law of rewinding. When a disease is being cured, the human body finds a way to let the disease out itself. This process occurs from the top part and downwards to the bottom part of the body. Alright, so it is a poop thing, and is the exact reverse of how the disease had occurred. In short, in cases of chronic and hard-to-cure diseases, patients must experience the Great Deflection during treatment every time the energy level of the body increases. The painful symptoms that accompany with the Great Deflection are positive signs that the disease is being cured. Therefore, for every Great Deflection, both the patient and the doctor should keep faith in the treatment so that the treatment progresses successfully. So basically, it's that old alternative medicine trope that if it makes you feel like shit, that means it's working. So I guess this is where my immortality journey ends, because I ain't trying to piss shit, I ain't trying to get Myung-Hyun. Guess I'm just gonna have to fucking die. But here's the thing about Alex Chiu. The man is much more than immortality. Alex Chiu contains multitudes. And he still continues to regularly upload content.
My name is Alex Chiu. I'm the guy who invented the physical immortality ring. I'm almost 48. I look pretty good, right?
This content includes predictions.
Donald Trump will invade North Korea. In my dreams, it was like 2020. It was 2020, yeah.
Beauty tips.
You know, if you're Asian and you have like Asian eyelid, you know how Asian eyes, how Asian eyes are, really small, the eyelids are small. I'm going to teach you today how to, get rid of your puffy eyes, It's very important for Asians.
Observations about society.
The black folks of America is right now worshipping Hitler. Yeah, what a surprise. What a coincidence.
Oh yeah, and he has a brand new invention, and a brand new website to go along with it. I love so much that even though he has a new website, he's keeping the 90s web design alive. But anyway, without further ado, meet Alex Chiu's cell realignment machine. What exactly does this machine do? Well, according to the animated GIFs on his website, it serves as a Tesla coil that heals the body. How does it heal your body? It charges the human body up so that electrons can jump from healthy cells to other healthy cells without the interference of the non-conductive and injured cells. Each time the electrons make a jump, a chi blockade has been opened. Weak and non-conductive cells have been squeezed out and have been replaced by healthy cells. Suddenly, the user felt a gush of chi energy flowing through the injured area, and in many cases, after just 5 minutes of usage, the user can feel an electric jolt at the core of the injury when the electrons make a jump. When the body is charged up with enough voltage, the electrons will bypass the weak and injured cells. Electrical jolts occur between the healthy cells. The bad and non-conductive cells are therefore destroyed by the electrical jolt and are squeezed out, allowing the healthy cells to realign themselves. Nobody has ever achieved this before. I am the only one who made it happen. Every time cells have been realigned, a small electronic jolt occurs. See picture below. So now that we know the process, what exactly does this do? Another page on the website explains, and let's take a moment to appreciate the fact that this page is named exactlydo.htm. Once again furthering the argument that Alex Chiu is in fact the king of 90s web design. What exactly can this machine cure or treat? The machine makes you prettier. By pointing the machine to your head and heal your head for 1 hour a day, you become prettier. Your face will become more symmetrical, your nose will shrink, your lips will shrink, your eye bags will shrink, your cheekbone will realign itself and make it presentable. The machine turns you into a super genius. The brain and the face is connected. If somebody is ugly, it means that he has a strange personality or is just stupid. Prettier people are more romantic, more smart, more lucky, or just more fun to be with. So when the machine makes your face prettier, it also realigns your brain cells. You start to think more, you start to enjoy educational videos like calculus or physics. After healing your head with the machine, you will get bored of movies and TV shows. You want to watch instructional videos like calculus or physics. The machine can make you fall asleep quicker, the machine can ease asthma attack, it realigns cells and repairs all sorts of cell damages. And he has a couple examples of the baldness being cured. One of them with a guy that really looks like that spray-on hair, and another one that's clearly labeled as being from hairtransplantnetwork.com. But apparently those are just examples he put up in case, you want an idea of what a person going from bald to not bald might look like. He goes on to explain the underlying principles behind this. We Chinese say that your face is the map of your mind. That's because the chi flow which travels to your brain must pass through the face first. So Chinese fortune tellers record a few commonly known facts. Thick lips equals stupid. Thin lips equals smart. Thick nose bridge equals emotional and short-tempered. Thin nose equals calm and logical. I wonder where he's going with this. Small and puffy eyes equals greedy and unimaginative. Big eyes equals romantic and adventurous with a scent of narcissistic behavior. Round face equals stubborn and closed-minded. Thin face equals decisive and quick-minded. This machine produces so much chi energy that it can alter the bone structure of your face, making you more and more superior by the day. And you will become prettier as you become more superior. At the end, every race will look like a white race. In the future, everybody will look like a white person but with a different skin color. Your face will gradually become more symmetrical as your personality improves. This is why men love pretty girls and women adore handsome guys. And he also gives us some before and after pictures. Before using the machine? Is that the woman from the fucking cabbage video again? He really hates that chick's eyes. 6 months later. Totally the same woman. Before using the machine, after using the machine. You have what appears to be an Asian man that after using his machine for 6 months becomes a pretty white lady. You know what? I think I'm sold. As soon as that machine turns me into a white lady, Tales from the Internet's cancelled, I'm gonna go be a Twitch thought, premium Snapchat, and I ain't paying no taxes.
I remember my first time. I had been flirting on and off with this girl for years, then one day I wake up to a text on my Nokia brick phone. It said, "You want to get busy?" I was over there so fast, you wouldn't even believe, pounding it out with Crazy Town playing in the background. I would think about all these shows I used to watch that built up virginity to be on this pedestal, and I thought, man, that was very unceremonious of me in comparison. On the flip side of that, you have what happened in July of 1998. That was when two 18-year-olds named Mike and Diane declared their intent to lose their virginity on the internet in a live stream. This is the story of OurFirstTime.com. This video took me places that I never imagined it was going to. You know, I thought it was just going to be a quick overview of this quirky old website, and it led me down this rabbit hole of complete insanity. It begins in July of 1998 with a website called OurFirstTime.com. The site told the story of two recently graduated 18-year-old honor students named Mike and Diane. And on the 8th of August, they were going to do a live stream of them losing their virginities. Note that it wasn't Mike or Diane themselves speaking to us, the audience. Instead, the entire website was presented from the perspective of an older gentleman named Oscar. Oscar was a web designer who was guiding them through this process. My name is Oscar, and I'll explain what brought this event to where it is now. Right now, you're probably in a state of shock, disbelief, and utter outrage. That is to be expected. The shattering of taboos can easily shake the pillars of society. Recently, I watched the live birth of a baby on the internet. Later, I wound up in a chat room where the topic was about the live birth. As expected, there are arguments and opinions from every corner of the country. There was one young woman named Diane who made a comment that caught my attention. She said that she thought the live birth was a wonderful and amazing experience. The only problem that she has is that most people think the live birth was beautiful, but if a couple were shown live on the internet in the act of conceiving a child, then most people would call that obscene. She finished by saying, if I could, I would lose my virginity live on the internet, just to show that the act of conceiving a child is just as beautiful as the delivery. I contacted Diane by email and introduced myself. Totally normal thing to do. I'm a website developer, and I asked her if she was serious about letting the world watch as she loses her virginity. I met with Diane and her boyfriend Mike, also a virgin, and we discussed this radical idea. After 2 weeks, Diane and Mike decided that this is something they feel passionate about and have agreed to allow the world to follow them for the next 18 days. Every day on this website, their lives will be chronicled in pictures and text as they climb the pinnacle of self-expression and make their worldwide statement of love when they consummate their relationship on the internet. Over the next 18 days, the older gentleman Oscar would join the two teens and interview them while taking pictures. When you took your AIDS test, you were both a little nervous. How did you feel today getting your results? It was also very much a product of its time. It's bad enough that I had to try and explain to my 10-year-old son what oral sex is because of the Monica Lewinsky stuff. What do you expect me to tell him about what you were doing? The truth. If you weren't around then, it cannot be understated how big of a deal the Monica Lewinsky-Bill Clinton scandal was. But anyway, let me get this straight. You got an older feller from a chat room online watching a live baby birth, hitting up an 18-year-old girl from the same chat room and asking her if she wants to lose her virginity on a live stream. In 1998, decades before OnlyFans. Seems legit. And just look at these 18-year-olds. These 18-year-olds are the most 18 years old any 18-year-olds have ever been. Nothing suspicious at all. And now, when I tell you about a website where two people are intending to lose their virginity on a stream, you're thinking it's probably a porn thing, right? Well, the site's creator didn't see it that way. OurFirstTime.com presented itself as an educational, safe sex experience for teens. This was an angle that was almost immediately mocked by a parody site, OurFirstAnalSex.com. Thanks for coming to OurFirstAnalSex.com for the story of Diane and Mike. People from around the globe, connected by a network of cables and satellites and phone lines, all have access to this site, and the connectivity is the power of the internet, blah blah blah. Anal sex is not dangerous if performed properly. Diane and Mike are played by trained professionals and will be performing with a full staff of healthcare providers on site. We do not recommend that you try ass-pounding yourself unless you are properly trained. You are a healthcare provider, your partner is a healthcare provider, or your partner is deceased or imaginary. We do recommend, before having sex with someone for the first time, that you get really drunk. This will make them seem more attractive. That doesn't work, try a mild hallucinogen, although this may interfere with sexual performance even more than alcohol does. Above all, have fun. Even if someone gets hurt, try to be certain it isn't you. Despite all the mockery and the very suspicious setup, the site gained a lot of attention almost immediately through both word of mouth and mainstream media coverage. So much so that the servers couldn't handle it and OurFirstTime.com was in search of better hosting. However, it was only porn hosts that were vying to help with the project, and they really weren't interested in doing anything with the porn industry. You know, despite offering a live sex cam. Their lawyer, identified as Mark Vega, spoke to Reuters. "This is not television or voyeurism, this is about participating in the dialogue. So stop listening to your minister, or preacher, or pope, or your boss, government, or regular, and take a step in the privacy of your own home on your computer and register your opinion," Vega told Reuters. Ultimately though, the clock was ticking and they had to get something together while people were still paying attention. They realized that they would have to compromise a little bit if they wanted to save the project. Enter the Internet Entertainment Group. The Internet Entertainment Group was the internet's first major pornography company. You probably remember them as the company that distributed the Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee sex tape. It was created by a man named Seth Warshawski, who had built the company with money he made in the phone sex industry. He was a major pioneer in this industry, creating the first website with live cam girls. This put him in the unique position to provide the website with the exact resources they needed. However, what seemed like a perfect match at first wound up being the project's undoing. Not long after the arrangements were made, IEA made a scathing post to their main website, clublove.com. In the post, they reveal Our First Time to be a scam. IEG can exclusively report that those behind OurFirstTime.com had attempted to mastermind a plot to not only manipulate the worldwide media, mislead the public, steal millions of dollars in site admission fees from the pockets of hard-working viewers around the globe, but in their own words, in tribute to Orson Welles and the 60th anniversary, this worldwide hoax will be bigger than his War of the Worlds as we tell the world we will consummate our relationship at 8 p.m. sharp, the same time War first began to play on the radio back in 1938. On their website, the alleged virgins answered the repeated question, "Is it real?" with the word yes. However, as smart as selecting IEG was for Mike and Diane, it would also lead to their fall from grace, as the mastermind behind this massive media hoax dreamed of sitting on a white sandy beach, sucking down a drink with an umbrella in it, thinking about the estimated $5 million in revenue to be generated and reading about his scam on the cover of Time magazine. IEG had their staff not only looking into how to resurrect the most beautiful site for these lovebirds, but also to look into the authenticity of the event. Soon, the man who called himself Oscar Welles checked into a $144 a night room with a double bed at Holiday Inn in Glendale, California, with a woman called Lydia Rawlings. After IEG exposed them, they fled the hotel room without checking out. Was having his intentions dissected in a swank high-tech conference room in Seattle, IEG headquarters. It was here, last night, that IEG officials discovered the truth behind Mike and Diane. A truth that not only horrified them, but angered them for what is nothing less than an assault on society and those who relish the internet. And for no other reason than to create havoc, those behind the hoax directed their site to Disney.com. IEG has provided Disney executives with this information. Who is Oscar Welles? The man who bragged to family and friends he'd go down in history alongside Orson Welles. His name is Kenneth Tipton. Tipton was once indicted on obscenity violations for selling videos such as Hail Mary. And one note before moving on with this, my research shows that the movie was actually the last temptation of Christ. His legal defense cost him everything he had, and to this day, blames the religious right for what he claims was an overzealous criminal prosecution. For simplification, we will refer to them as they deservingly do, the scammers. As the post went on, Seth laid out how the event was intended to play out. But here's what Mr. Tipton, or the scammers, exclusively told IEG was really planned for the site. On a daily basis, they would keep the viewers updated. The couple would pretend to intend to lose their virginity. They would go get AIDS tests. The couple would discuss how excited they were. On the big day, the day the couple claimed they would lose their virginity, the website would no longer be free. The website would cost $5 per person. Then, when the moment comes to do the deed in front of the audience paying $5 a connection, the couple would abstain. Nobody has any intention of having sex, said Tipton. You won't even see them naked. Christ, I wouldn't be surprised to find out Diane lost her virginity years ago in the back seat of a Chevy. Mr. Tipton said that he and the scammers who worked with him pulled this ploy for two basic reasons. 1, to make money, and 2, to get back at the religious right. Surely, this was the end of OurFirstTime.com, right? Well, a week later, Ken Tipton, having now dropped the moniker of Oscar Wells, starts speaking to the press. He denies that the website is a hoax, and now says that it will be hosted by Condomania.com. Condomania being a condom store chain. He also announced that there would be a press conference for the event held at Condomania's LA store. The press conference happened, and it did not go well. As he sat uncomfortably in front of a wall of various styles of condoms, Ken announced that the website was indeed a hoax. Or as he put it to the audience of pissed off reporters who were now yelling at him, an internet soap opera. Mike and Diane were revealed to be Ty Taylor, an actor who had just moved to LA and been working as an extra, and Michelle Parma, an actress who was previously in a season of Road Rules on MTV. And they maintained throughout the whole press conference that this was intended to be educational. This was about making a moral lesson, Taylor said. It was going to be the biggest public service announcement ever, Parma said with feeling, adding that if the event had taken place, it would have been about safe sex and abstinence. Reporters listened incredulously as the red-haired Parma explained, "You have to hit young people over the head. Public service announcements say, do this, don't do that, wear condoms. But it doesn't sink in because the kids can't relate to them. We were going to relate to young people."
How do I reach these kids?
Obviously, the stream never actually happened, and after the press conference, the script for the final day was posted. Allow me to read an excerpt from this masterpiece. Mike, are you ready to choose which condom? He holds out his bald fist. Diane holds out hers. Diane, ready. 1, 2, 3. Diane displays a flat palm, signifying paper. Mike displays a bald fist, signifying rock. Mike, okay, you won. You choose. Diane, I think we'll use your condom. Alright, not too outlandish yet, this is how the process usually goes. Mike picks up a packet off the end table near the bed. He starts to tear it open, but has difficulty. Diane, did you read the directions? Mike squints at the package. Mike, I'm nervous enough. I can't read writing the size of mouse tracks. Diane takes the packet from him and opens it quickly, pulls out the condom and hands it to him. He shrugs, slightly embarrassed. Diane, it's a girl thing. You could still open a jar of pickles better than I can. They wound up ruining that condom and trying to use the other one before deciding, you know what, fuck it, let's not do this. After they decide not to go through with it, the camera pans to a chair in the same room where Oscar's sitting with them. He then gives a monologue on the importance of Orson Welles and the power of the internet. End scene. You'll be happy to know, though, that in a parallel world, the couple from OurFirstAnalSex.com did go through with it. It's all over. On August 11th, 1998, at approximately 5:15 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Diane had her rectum penetrated by Mike, and thus they both lost their anal virginity. It was very rewarding for both of them, and they might even try it again in the near future. The transcript of the event will be available in a matter of days, so be sure to return then. Shortly after this all fell apart, Ken Tipton decided to take Seth Warshawski to court for defamation. It took a couple of years for them to actually see trial, and when it happened, the case was dismissed. Ken was given another chance due to appeal, but that too was dismissed, and this time, Seth Warshawski had fled the country. Owing a massive settlement to Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee, he just bailed to Thailand. In an interview, he explained that he had enough money left to live 50 comfortable lives over there. And I thought originally this would be where the video ended, but it is definitely not. I was looking at the Museum of Hoaxes article about this topic when I noticed a single comment. It was left by someone named Darlene Lieblick. In the comments, she asserted that the article was wrong about this story, and she attached a link to what she said was the true story. That link went to the website for the movie Heart of the Beholder. Heart of the Beholder was a 2005 film written and directed by none other than Ken Tipton himself. It's probably most notable for being one of the first acting roles of Chloe Moretz. And it tells the story of a video store owner who runs into a conflict with a conservative religious group over a controversial movie. In other words, a fictional retelling of what actually happened to Ken Tipton in real life. Although the site was mostly about the movie itself, there were 2 memorial pages. One of them for the director Robert Wise, who mentored Ken Tipton, and one for Michelle Parma, the actress for Diane, who since then had passed away in a car accident. The Robert Wise memorial page tells of how Heart of the Beholder came to be. Originally, Heart of the Beholder was going to be produced for HBO, but they dropped the project. It was Robert Wise who pushed Tipton to make the movie himself, encouraging him to do over 200 script rewrites. He finally had a finished product. So Ken starts shopping the screenplay around, and he's getting some offers, but they're only writing offers, and they wouldn't allow him to direct the movie. And he didn't want that because he was concerned that if another director ruined the movie, it would be bad for his career. So he turned all those offers down, and at a loss, he consults Wise one more time. Things back in St. Louis were very hard for Ken's ex-wife and their children, so Ken asked Mr. Wise for advice. Mr. Wise said that this situation reminded him of his old friend named Orson Welles. In the 1930s, Orson was a star on radio, which was the largest mass medium at the time. TV had not been invented yet, and movies were still growing. Orson wanted desperately to make movies, but the powers that be thought of him as only a radio person and not talented or creative enough to make it in the movies. So Orson decided to create a publicity stunt to prove them wrong. It was Wise's suggestion that Tipton take after Orson Welles and create his own publicity stunt. Taking Mr. Wise's advice to design a publicity stunt to bring attention to his movie project, Ken first decided to use the internet because it was the newest form of mass communication and it reached the entire world. The hardest part was coming up with an idea that would be instantly popular and controversial, so the content would spread quickly because of reactions to it. Invaders from space had already been done, and there isn't much else you can get from millions of people talking, except sex. Yes, sex. The bane of conservatives, and the delight of liberals. After all, this was 1998, and the Monica Lewinsky/President Clinton sex scandal was going absolutely bananas. Like I said, this was a really big deal at the time. Every possible sexual allegation and innuendo was being dissected daily in every form of media. Ken knew if he could come up with some original sexual internet soap opera, then the conservatives would fire up their email lists and the liberals would rise to defend it, which would create its own publicity. But try as he could, no plausible story idea would come to him. But that was about to change and become the world's largest publicity stunt ever. And it's on the memorial page for Michelle that they go further in depth about the publicity stunt itself. In fact, the Michelle Parma memorial page contains relatively little information about Michelle herself, and is mostly pages upon pages explaining the publicity stunt and the war with Seth Warshawski. This is an absolutely massive page, so I'm going to do my best to break it down for you. Originally, it was intended that after the publicity stunt, Mike and Diane, Ty, and Michelle would go on to star in Heart of the Beholder using publicity from the stunt to promote the movie. It was asserted that it was never intended to deceive the reporters, and they should have known it was a hoax. The reason why they should have known it was a hoax is because they put phrases in quotation marks, such as church-going honor students, and losing their internet virginity. Because, you know, that's how quotation marks work. It goes on to discuss the deal with IEG. According to the person that wrote this, the original deal was that IEG would provide the servers at first with no ads and no fees. After 6 months, IEG would retain the website and be able to do whatever they wanted with it. But after the massive traffic came in, Warshawski said, you know what, we should probably charge $5 for this to have an adult verification. Ken did not want the adult verification because he wanted kids and teenagers to see this vital safe sex lesson. It also tells how Adam Glickman, the owner of Condomania, told them that they could make money to fund the movie by collecting user data from registrations. Warshawski was also unhappy that he would not be getting money from the user data list. So ultimately he reneged on the deal and took the site away. And at this point, obviously one of these guys is lying. Either Warshawski canceled the deal because he didn't want to be associated with a hoax, or he canceled it because he wasn't making enough money on it. The page then goes on to explain that the event simply could not go on without the use of IAG's ultra supercomputer servers, and that if everything went as planned, the Our First brand could have been as big as Yahoo, Google, MySpace, YouTube, and it's also explained that Tipton did regret how he went about the stunt. He realized that the Oscar character was a really bad idea and he should have never spoken to reporters in character. To me, there's something interesting to think about with this, and it's that in a way, Ken was kind of onto something. He very badly miscalibrated his attempt, and he probably did it a few years too early, but I can't help but look at something like Lonely Girl 15, which happened 8 years later. It wasn't as preposterous as this, but it was a hoax in the same vein. A dramatized fictional story that tricks people into thinking it's reality. And this still isn't where the story ends for Ken Tipton. You see, I was a little curious about what he'd been up to lately, and I could not believe what I found. You might remember the commenter from the Museum of Hoaxes, Darlene Lieblich, now Darlene Lieblich Tipton. Since then, she'd become the vice president of Fox Cable Networks in LA. Then in 2014, this happens. Veteran Fox TV executive fired over fundraising campaign for relatives of missing Malaysia plane passengers. So for those unaware, Malaysia Flight 370 was a passenger plane that in 2004 just kinda vanished, totally missing along with its 239 occupants. To this day, nobody actually knows what happened to that plane. And at first, the reaction to this story was kind of favorable to Diane. I mean, to fire someone for raising money for a good cause, that's real scummy. But then, the nature of the actual emails she sent came out. Around this time, a woman named Sarah Bosch, the girlfriend of one of the passengers, Philip Wood, had been making some press appearances to talk about the disappearance. Darlene reached out to Sarah from her Fox email to talk about a project with her husband, Ken. To the point, my producer / partner / husband, Ken, and I are working on a project that focuses on the compensation of family members of victims from Flight 370. We both saw your interview with Ronan Farrow and kept hoping he would ask if you were considered family because you were Philip's partner for 9 years and whether or not you qualified for compensation by the airlines or any other kind of, sorry about this word but I can't think of any other, survivor's benefits. If you don't mind, I'm going to turn this over to Ken and he would like to ask you some questions by email or Skype. His email is above. The bottom line is that we want to help you get what you deserve as much as any other family member. Thanks, and I hope to be able to talk to you myself soon. Darlene Tipton, Vice President, Standards and Practices, Fox Cable Networks. Sarah thought this might have been some kind of a scam because it sounds like a scam, and more emails came of growing intensity. Eventually, Darlene said that she knew what happened to the passengers on that flight, and that her husband Ken was having prophetic visions of what happened to the flight. Ken's vision can be viewed on YouTube.
Oh, this has got to be an illusion. This has got to be the pills, the medicine. I am hallucinating. This is not real. I got a strange question to ask you. Is this real? Is this real? What's happening right now?
It is. What is real?
That's my problem. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm seeing.
What are you seeing right now?
I'm seeing.
Ultimately, and you're gonna be shocked by this one, the plan was for Ken and Darlene to make a movie about the Malaysian flight. It would be based on the contents of a secret thumb drive she became privy to at Fox. In March of 2014, 40-year-old Hollywood veteran Darlene Lieblich Tipton was a vice president of broadcast standards and practices at Fox Cable Networks in Los Angeles. S&P is the department responsible for the moral, ethical, and legal implications of what the network airs. During this time, Darlene was at a high-level meeting to discuss the contents of a smuggled Chinese thumb drive. The drive contained detailed information and previously unseen pictures, video footage, and text files regarding the disappearance of MH370. Malaysia Flight number 370 after the plane had gone missing. The materials revealed who hijacked the plane, why, what went wrong, where it all ended, and why China has a lot to answer for. The movie would also show that the disappearance of the flight was connected to the Chinese government's harvesting of organs from Falun Gong prisoners, and it would be crowdfunded, providing commemorative coins as a reward. And their goal was to have it be directed by Martin Scorsese and feature a cast with actors such as Brad Pitt, Harrison Ford, and Lady Gaga. This movie was not made, and the last post on their crowdfunding website explains why. Update September 29th, 2019. Executive producer Darlene Lieblich-Tipton went to Australia and New Zealand to negotiate the funding of the Malaysia 370 movie. On her return, she was stopped at LAX and questioned by agents of the US government. At the advice of her personal attorney, the Malaysia 370 project is now on an indefinite hold until national security issues can be resolved. All donations have been returned and further donations will not be accepted at this time. The downloading of songs and the purchase of the memorial coin will still be active. I think I gotta get my hands on one of those coins. I like collecting little trophies that come from this channel.
Bonsai is the ancient Japanese art of growing miniature trees by keeping them in containers that restrict their growth. Although the art of bonsai is often admired for its incredible aesthetics and its connection to Buddhist tradition, there are those who are troubled by the ethics of stunting the growth of a tree. Growing bonsai is cruel. You stunt their growth. Don't allow the roots to grow. Bind their branches with wire, like the feet of Japanese ladies. Okay, cruel? Well, if there's people out there who think bonsai trees are cruel, wait till they find out about the bonsai kittens. Bonsai Kitten represents an important moment in internet history, both as one of the fastest spreading memes of the pre-social media era, and as one of the first internet hoaxes that got way bigger than its creators ever expected. It begins on December 20th of 2000 when it was uploaded by a man going by the name Dr. Michael Wong. The intro page describes the guiding principles of Bonsai Kitten. For centuries, people in the West have marveled at the delicate beauty produced by Oriental artists and sculptors. From gardening to tattooing to dance and martial arts, these craftsmen have enthralled us with complex forms and simplistic perfection. One of the most fascinating of the visual techniques to emerge from this highly cultured region is the Oriental art of miniature sculpture. Who has not been stricken with the expressive grace of Japanese bonsai? Though once the sole province of bonsai masters within Japan, bonsai plants have been available to fortunate consumers throughout the world for some time. With this in mind, we are proud to now offer to you the animal complement of this art form, the Bonsai Kitten. Central principles. A bonsai plant, along with its more widely encountered counterpart, the topiary garden, achieves its miniature yet mature form through a long and delicate process of trimming during the formative years of the tree. It is not possible to trim a kitten. However, fortunately, the Oriental artists of yore were also expert in the modification of animal forms. Both foot binding and head binding were practiced in the Far East for the purpose of miniaturizing the feet and shaping the head into attractive shapes. This technique is also the principle behind the well-known corset, which is regaining popularity in recent years. By physically constraining the growth of a developing living thing, it can be directed to take the shape of the vessel that constrains it. Just as a topiary gardener produces bushes that take the forms of animals or any other thing, you no longer need be satisfied with a house pet having the same mundane shape as all other members of its species. With Bonsai Kitten, a world of variation awaits you, limited only by your own imagination. It then gives you the process about how you can make your very own Bonsai Kitten. Method. At only a few weeks of age, a kitten's bones have not yet hardened and become osseous. They are extremely soft and springy. In fact, if you take a week-old kitten and throw it to the floor, it will actually bounce. We do not recommend that you try this at home. The kitten may bounce under the furniture and be difficult to retrieve, as well as covered in unsightly household dust. However, the flexibility of the kitten's skeleton means that if the bones are gently warped at this early age, they could be molded into any desired shape. At Bonsai Kitten, we achieved this by placing the kitten into a rigid vessel soon after birth, and allowing the young cat to grow out its formative time entirely within this container. The kitten essentially grows into the shape of the vessel. Once the cat is fully developed, it is removed, or the vessel broken to remove it, producing the lovable, furry pet you've always wanted, but it remains in the shape you've always dreamed of. There is virtually no limit to the eventual shape of your pet. This process, of course, would not actually work. The cat would very quickly die before it became any kind of square or jar shape or anything like that. But of course, this is the internet, so that didn't stop people from falling for it, and what really sealed the deal was the gallery of 100% really real images of real bonsai kittens. And this site spread extremely quickly in a very short amount of time, primarily because 2 days later, on December 22nd, it was featured as Cruel.com's Cruel Site of the Day. Once it hit that site, the traffic to Bonsai Kitten exploded, and also, despite the fact that Cruel.com is named Cruel.com and its feature was the Cruel Site of the Day, it was just a bit too much for their viewers and they started to get a ton of backlash. It doesn't matter that the site was obviously fake as fuck to anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together. They caved to the pressure and removed it. But the site itself remained up, causing more outcry, and eventually the Humane Society of America got involved. In response to the many complaints we received, the HSUS investigated the origin of the site. We found that the original host of the site was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and that the name and address under which the site is registered, a Dr. Michael Wong in New York, is false information. The site was reportedly created by a student at MIT as a joke among friends. Encouraged by all the negative attention, the student cited his right to free speech in an attempt to keep the site up and running. MIT was supportive of the concerns of animal organizations and citizens who complained about the site and cooperated to the fullest extent allowed by the law in removing the site, which they did on December 22nd. Shortly after its removal from MIT's servers, however, Bonsai Kitten would quickly return on another web host. And a bunch of people, still convinced that Bonsai Kitten was real, started an email campaign. To anyone with love and respect for life, in New York there is a Japanese who sells bonsai kittens. Sounds like fun, huh? Not! These animals are squeezed into a bottle. Their urine and feces are removed through probes. They feed them with a kind of tube. They feed them chemicals to keep their bones soft and flexible, so the kittens grow into the shape of the bottle. The animals will stay there as long as they live. They can't walk or move or wash themselves. Bonsai kittens are becoming a fashion in New York and Asia. See this horror at bonsaikitten.com. Please sign this email in protest against these tortures. If you receive an email with over 500 names, please send a copy to anacheka@hotmail.com. From there, this protest will be sent to USA and Mexican animal protection organizations. And as the email campaign grew, the Humane Society would once again jump into action. In mid-January, we began receiving complaints about the site resurfacing, and we learned that the site's new host was not MIT, but a company called Web2010.com. We contacted this company to voice our concerns, and the company immediately removed the site on January 17th. After this removal, it would be Soylent, the owner of Rotten.com, who would take Bonsai Kitten and allow them to be hosted on Rotten servers. They would continue to receive tons of backlash, but Soylent, as the guy who ran Rotten.com, really didn't give a shit. This was child's play to him. Although they did up the ante a bit when the FBI got involved. FBI goes after bonsaikitten.com. Here's what you do. Stuff a kitten into a jar and shape it into a beautiful. Of course it's a joke, but not everybody is laughing, and that includes the FBI. Declan McCullough reports from Washington, D.C. FBI agents in the Boston field office have launched an investigation into the site. They also have served MIT with a grand jury subpoena asking for any and all subscriber information about the site, which was initially hosted in a campus dormitory but has since moved to a commercial provider. And when Wired asked him what he thought about this investigation, one of the site's creators responded. "I was surprised," Chang said. "I really thought that the FBI had better things to do. That's your tax dollars at work." And during this investigation, the Massachusetts SPCA deployed their special police, because apparently that's something they have. A gun-toting investigator from the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals reportedly stopped by campus and quizzed MIT network administrators about the intent of the site. Under state law, MSPCA investigators are deputized as special state police officers with investigation and arrest abilities. And at this point, it was pretty commonly known that Bonsai Kitten was a parody website and that even if someone tried to really do this, it wouldn't work. But then of course, as these things do, the argument shifted away from they're showing animal cruelty to they might inspire animal cruelty. And then when we get there, we start to wade into the waters of the free speech debate. Why are they doing this? Asks Harvey Silverglate, a prominent Boston criminal defense attorney. I think the answer is that political correctness has infected the FBI. The kind of fanatical end of the spectrum animal protection movement has affected them, says Silverglate, a partner at Silverglate & Good. They want to be the good guys. They massively run rampant over Americans' liberties, but they want to be seen as nice fuzzy guys who want to protect kittens. And ultimately, what people were hoping to do with Bonsai Kitten were use a law that was signed by Bill Clinton in 1999. In December 1999, President Clinton signed a law that makes it a federal felony to possess a depiction of animal cruelty with the intent to distribute across state lines, such as on the internet. During a floor debate, Representative Elton Gallegly claimed that sick criminals are taking advantage of the loopholes in the local law and the lack of federal law on animal cruelty videos. Thankfully, whether it be because of free speech concerns, difficulties implementing this law, or maybe the FBI just realized how ridiculous this was, nobody wound up getting prosecuted for Bonsai Kitten. The site would stay online until 2016, with a brief period in 2012 where it would direct to Think Geek's Bonsai Kitten plushies. And to this day, although the official site is now gone, it still is available through several mirrors, and it still, although not as commonly, tricks a few dopes into thinking it's real. In fact, let's try something. Think of the most gullible person you know, and try to convince them that Bonsai Kitten is a real thing, and come back and report your results to me. What's the strangest thing you've ever eaten? There's a lot of weird food out there from all around the world, and although some people are hesitant to step outside their comfort zone of chicken tendies and french fries, other people pride themselves in their adventurous eating habits. And you probably won't be surprised when I say that some of the strangest delicacies in the world, at least to the Western palate, come from Asian countries. But the thing is that people are so used to the idea of weird food coming out of the Far East that they're willing to believe just about anything you tell them. And this brings us to the early 2000s, when a photo of a Chinese man eating what appears to be a baby went viral. It circulated all over the world through chain emails and Rotten.com with a story attached to it about how eating babies is the hottest new trend in Asia. It's a completely ridiculous story, yet thousands of people fell for it, including Scotland Yard and the FBI. So who is this guy, and what's the real story behind these photos? Find out in this episode of Tales from the Internet. Although chain emails were a plague on the early days of the internet, I kinda love them a little bit. And a big part of that is just the absolute absurd things that people would send me. I mean, you've seen the lobster video. And I'm about to tell you about an old chain email that we can file away with the lobster story, except for the fact that this one is much more grounded in reality. A story about the so-called growing trend of cannibalism in China or Taiwan or whichever Asian country. There's several different versions of these emails dating all the way back to the year 2000. One of which reads, Oh, how cruel can humans be? Please finish your meal before open the files. What you are going to witness here is a fact. Don't get scared. It's Taiwan's hottest food. In Taiwan, dead babies or fetuses could be bought at $50 or $70 from hospitals to meet the high demand for grilled and barbecued babies. What a sad state of affairs. Please forward this message to as many people as you can, so it can be seen by the world and someone takes action on the same. And attached are pictures of an Asian man feasting on what appears to be a big old plate of goo goo gaga. If you've ever seen these pictures before, chances are that you've never forgotten them. These pictures would eventually find their way to Rotten.com, which published their own version of the story. The Final Taboo. What is probably said most frequently about us is, Rotten.com is pretty awful, but at least they don't have pictures of people eating babies. Well, if you are easily alarmed, you probably don't want to see these two pictures from our anonymous Asian correspondent. Just as with animals, infanticide is common in the animal kingdom, but it is often followed by infantiphagia, the eating of babies. Incidents of chimpanzees, one of mankind's closest relatives, consuming their young are well documented. Good eating is, after all, good eating. These photos were sent to us anonymously. It is difficult to determine where they were taken, Hong Kong or Japan, or whether crimes were committed in the process. It is difficult to imagine the act pictured being legal in any jurisdiction. Rotten.com, of course, at this point had already found themselves in the middle of a number of legal disputes. The Burlington Coat Factory, Bonsai Kitten, and on February 22nd of 2001, the Asian cannibal controversy would set off yet another legal problem for the website. It was on this date that a number of British news outlets began to publish satanic panic-style coverage of the pictures, focused on Rotten's involvement. A picture of a man apparently dining with gusto on a roasted baby at the Rotten.com website has led to a police inquiry by Scotland Yard and the FBI, according to a horrifying story by The Independent. British detectives are trying to close a website showing pictures of a man eating a dismembered baby, further evidence of the extent of child abuse and exploitation published on the internet. British detective Clive Driscoll explains, "According to Driscoll, the pictures are awful. It is your worst nightmare unfolding in front of you. I took them to a very senior forensic pathologist, a man I have a lot of faith in, and he looked me in the eye and said, 'These pictures I hoped I would never see. For me, it's a murder scene because I don't know how that child died,' the so-called detective says." But despite this commotion, Soylent, the owner of Rotten.com, said that he had never been contacted regarding this investigation. You can imagine our surprise when we read that Rotten.com was being investigated by the FBI on the front page of the UK newspaper The Independent. Apparently, someone at Scotland Yard decided to close the website after he saw some pictures that upset him, the admin say. And after all that, the panicked journalism, the FBI, Scotland Yard. The very next day, on February 23rd of 2001, the truth of these pictures came out. Online Baby Muncher is an artist. Foitis on your breath. The man pictured apparently eating a small roast baby in our previous story turns out to be an artist named Zio, who performed a conceptual piece called Eating People at a Shanghai Arts Festival last year. And it wasn't any of these outraged journalists or Scotland Yard or the FBI that got to the bottom of this. It was regular internet users like you who discovered it on, you ready for this? ChineseArt.com. So the gist of this performance piece by Zio goes as follows. He begins by announcing, "I herewith announce my intention and my aim to eat people as a protest against mankind's moral idea that he/she cannot eat people." He then proceeds to wash, cook, and eat the baby as someone takes photos of him. The photos of this performance were then to be placed on display at the arts festival. But there is one problem. The public never actually saw these photos. You see, because of the very obviously controversial nature of this art piece, the organizers of the art festival were concerned that it might get the whole thing shut down. So the night before they open, Zio returns to the premises along with another Chinese artist, Ai Weiwei, and they removed all the pictures. So at this point, nobody had actually seen these pictures aside from Zio, the photographer, and the people involved in the arts festival. That was until somehow the photos found their way to a Malaysian publication known as Perdan Weekly. It was in this magazine that the photos were published without any indication that they had anything to do with an art installation. It's just like, hey, look at this guy eating some babies. And it's from that point that the pictures made their way onto the internet with the sensationalist story attached. It's actually very similar to the Chinese plastic surgery story that I covered a few months ago. I guess this is just a common way that these kinds of stories make their way onto the internet. And all that being said, what was that baby actually? The majority of sources that I've come across say that the baby was most likely made of doll parts and duck meat. But according to a number of these same sources, Yu tells a different story. They claim that Yu said that he obtained an aborted fetus to eat, and he really did eat it, and it was disgusting, and he vomited profusely. And I could see an artist saying something like that even if it wasn't true, just because in the art world, especially that kind of conceptual modern art, the persona of the artist is basically as important as the art itself. But from what I can tell, the only time he has actually said this was in a fictional work, a film that he made in 2003 entitled Corpse Case. Although I was unable to get a copy of the film, I was able to obtain a partial transcript of it from Wikipedia, which cites it as evidence that he claimed to eat the baby for real, despite the fact that the page that they linked to says, "Note, the following text is the transcript of the video work Yu's Corpse Case." I've said it before and I'll say it again, always check the sources when you're reading Wikipedia. Anyway, the film is a depiction of a fictional court case in which Zhu Yu portrays an artist named Zhu Ji. The character Zhu Ji created an art installation similar to eating people, and in the story, he claims that he tricked a hospital into giving it to him. The character Zhu Ji then eats the fetus in his art exhibit and vomits profusely. The fictional court case then goes on to talk about incidents such as one in which the artist chops up his own child and feeds it to a hungry dog. From what I can tell, it's very clearly intended to be an over-the-top fictionalized version of himself, but not an admission of anything. So ultimately, no, I don't think this guy went and actually ate a real baby. But that hasn't stopped him from legitimately being one of China's most controversial artists. And eating people is really just the tip of the iceberg with his work. He had another piece where he takes a real human brain, slices it up, boils it, and autographs the pieces. Then he sells the pieces and people bought them. And he has another piece where art patrons go into a room with a tangled rope held by a decomposing human arm and they gotta get around the rope to get out of the room. And then there's one where he actually had a surgery done to remove a big piece of his skin and have it grafted onto a pig. And video footage of this surgery is available and he does have the scar to show for it. And the question you gotta ask a lot of the time with an artist like this is, what's the point? Why would you do something like this? And in the case of eating people, at the height of the controversy with Scotland Yard and the FBI investigation, Zhu Yu actually went on a British documentary to talk about his piece. No religion forbids cannibalism, nor can I find any law which prevents us from eating people. I took advantage of the space between morality and the law and based my work on it. So as I understand it, the point of this piece, in which a man eats a boiled baby in front of a bunch of people, is to demonstrate the difference between what we inherently find to be right and wrong, and what the law determines is right and wrong. Let me know what you think about his message.
In July of 1998, radio host Art Bell would receive a series of faxes from a man claiming to be a time traveler from the year 2036. Although this might seem ridiculous to most broadcasters, Art's show Coast to Coast AM built its massive fanbase on stories of the mysterious and the paranormal. Aliens, ghosts, cryptids, no topic was off limits, and Art prided himself in providing a ridicule-free platform for people with ideas on the fringes of society. So of course, at his first chance, he read those faxes on the air.
Dear Art, I had to fax when I heard other time travelers calling in from any time past the year 2500 AD. Please, let me explain.
The faxes would go on to describe the man's personal experiences with time travel and make a number of dire predictions for the near future. They also provided contact information and a promise to send proof to Art. However, the proof was never sent, and the time traveler would disappear without another word. The time traveler was all but forgotten about until 2 years later when he would make another appearance, this time not through faxes but on the internet.
Now going by the name John Titor, the time traveler would become the source of a mystery that would bridge the gap between the old media and the internet. A mystery that continues to capture people's imaginations to this very day. But was he really a time traveler? And if not, who was the man behind the curtain? Find out in this episode of Tales from the Internet. The John Titor mystery is probably the most requested topic for me to cover on this channel, and probably one of the most famous unsolved mysteries on the entire internet. It's a very dense, somewhat confusing tale with a number of players involved who may or may not be totally honest. Now, all that being said, let's start from the beginning. The first fax by a time traveler would be sent to Art Bell in July of 1998, and it's important to note that at this time, Art would often receive calls from people claiming to be time travelers. In the fax, the time traveler claims to take issue with other callers who claim that they're coming from past the year 2500. According to the fax, whenever a time traveler goes past the year 2564, they hit an impassable brick wall. He goes on to describe how time travel works. Time travel was invented in 2034. Offshoots of certain successful fusion reactor research allowed scientists at CERN to produce the world's first contained singularity engine. The basic design involves rotating singularities inside a magnetic field. By altering the speed and direction of rotation, you can travel both forward and backward in time. Time itself can be understood in terms of connected lines. When you go back in time, you travel on your original timeline. When you turn your singularity engine off, a new timeline is created due to the fact that you and your time machine are now there. In other words, a new universe is created. He then goes on to make a number of predictions. 1. Y2K is a disaster. Oof, not really off to a good start. 2. The government tries to keep power by instituting martial law, but all of it collapses when their efforts to bring the power back up fail. 3. A power facility in Denver is able to restart itself, but is mobbed by hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed. This convinces most that maybe we shouldn't bring the old system back up. 4. A few years later, communal government system is developed after the Constitution takes a few twists. China retakes Taiwan, Israel wins the largest battle for their life, and Russia is covered in nuclear snow from their collapsed reactors. Now, obviously, this whole series of events doesn't happen because Y2K just was not the disaster it was expected to be. But the true believers of the time traveler say that it didn't happen because he's the one who stopped it. Or there's also the chance that since he's from a different timeline from ours, that it simply was never going to play out for us the way it played out for him. But really, these faxes were just an appetizer, something that was mostly forgotten about, along with all of the other time travelers who contacted Art Bell over the years. The ball really started getting rolling on November 2nd, 2000, when a user named TimeTravel0 posted to the Time Travel Institute forums. Greetings, I am a time traveler from the year 2036. I am on my way home after getting an IBM 5100 computer system from the year 1975. My time machine is a stationary mass temporal displacement unit manufactured by General Electric. The unit is powered by two top-spin dual positive singularities that produce a standard offset Tipler sinusoid. I will be happy to post pictures of the unit. And in January, he would go on to make the same exact post to the Art Bell forums, now under the username John Titor. He proceeded to post pictures of his time machine, which was installed in a 1967 Chevy Corvette. He also posted a picture of using the machine to bend a laser beam and of the machine's schematics. His explanation for how time travel works was also very much the same in that when you go back in time, you actually go to a separate world line. This means that although you can affect the future in the world you travel to, you're not affecting your own future. That means, for example, you can't accidentally erase yourself by cock-blocking your dad or anything like that. So if you can't change the future in any kind of way that'll actually affect you, why even bother? And the answer is to get stuff like the 5100 computer. So now you have a time traveler posting on a forum. The logical thing is that people are going to ask him for all kinds of predictions. So people are asking him all the usual dumb things like lotto numbers and sports trivia. Think about it for a second. Do you remember yesterday's lotto numbers, or for that matter, any set of lotto numbers that has ever existed except maybe the ones from Lost? Can you tell me, without looking it up, and be honest, who won the Stanley Cup 35 years ago? Probably not, so why would a time traveler? So, to avoid this type of continued annoyance, John laid out some rules. 1. I will not disclose any information that will cause someone to personally gain by its knowledge. This means no stock or sports tips. 2. I will not disclose any detailed information that would allow someone to avoid death by probability. This means no earthquake or bomb information. 3. I will not disclose any information that may compromise any future actions by individual people or threaten their family and well-being. I will not disclose names or events associated with individuals. And although these rules do seem kinda limiting, he actually did manage to make a lot of predictions. For instance, he said that the Olympics would end in 2004. I honestly wish that were true because I just don't get the appeal of the Olympics. Oh wow, this guy jumps into the water better than the other guy jumps into the water. You know, maybe I'd care if they were punching each other while doing it. But shockingly, in John's world, the Olympics weren't cancelled due to declining ratings. Rather, they were cancelled due to growing civil unrest. And it was that unrest that was the centerpiece of John's predictions. John described growing tensions between rural and urban populations and people escaping from the cities to get away from government control. And I imagine that a lot of you hearing this and thinking about our current political landscape are thinking that doesn't sound too far-fetched. But it's when he starts going more into specifics that things start to fall apart. The year 2008 was a general date by which time everyone will realize the world they thought they were living in was over. The Civil War in the United States will start in 2004. I would describe it as having a Waco-type event every month that steadily gets worse. The conflict will consume everyone in the US by 2012 and end in 2015 with a very short World War III. And for those of you unfamiliar with Waco, it was an incident in which the ATF and the FBI raided a compound owned by the Branch Davidians, a doomsday cult. The raid occurred because they were believed to be stockpiling illegal weapons, and it culminated in a 51-day firefight between hundreds of people, leaving 86 dead. Outright open fighting was common by then, and I joined the Shotgun Infantry Unit in 2011. I joined with the Fighting Diamondbacks for about 4 years. Hearing in my right ear isn't as good as I would like it. The Civil War ended in 2015 when Russia attacked the US cities, our enemy, China and Europe. As unusual and bad as my childhood might seem, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And the reason why World War III was so short was because it was an all-out nuclear conflict. Basically, they hit the reset button Fallout style. And now, although the state of domestic and international politics leaves a bit to be desired these days, I don't seem to recall shotgun militias of child soldiers roaming the streets. I don't recall monthly pitched battles between hundreds of people, and I don't remember everything getting nuked 3 years ago. But you know, I was playing a lot of COD back then, so I might have just missed it. But missed predictions aside, there were a couple things that he said that did gain him a lot of credibility. For instance, there were people who said that his description of using singularities conflicted with our knowledge of physics at the time. But then in 2004, Stephen Hawking published a paper revising his theories and making them fall more in line with what John Titor said. Additionally, Titor claimed that the reason he was looking for the IBM 5100 computer was that it had an unpublicized secret feature that he needed in the future. He needed this feature in the year 2036 to deal with a Y2K-like bug with Unix systems in 2038. And this is a real bug that is known about. And it was later confirmed by Bob Dubke, who is one of the developers of the 5100 computer, that the secret feature John Titor spoke of was in fact a real feature. And now there are people that claim that this secret feature of the 5100 wasn't as secret as it was made out to be, but at the very least, if this was a hoax, it would require someone to be in the IT industry to know about this. And it was pretty evenly split. There were a lot of people who believed in John Titor, and there were a lot of people who thought he was full of shit. Either way, it would be on March 24th of 2001 that John Titor would make his last post. I will be leaving this world line shortly, and this will be my final post. There are only a handful of people who will know exactly when I will be leaving, and I'm sure they will let you know when I'm gone. In the last few days, I have found your choice of topics quite interesting, and from an objective viewpoint, I think it collectively answers one of your own questions. If time travel is real, where are all the time travelers? In the past, I have stated that quite frankly, you all scare the hell out of me, and I'm sure other temporal drivers would feel the same. But now I have an expanded explanation with 2 examples. A while ago, on one of the posts, I related an experience I had with my parents while we were driving down a highway. Every now and then, we would pass someone who was in obvious distress with their vehicle. I was amazed that so many people could pass them by without stopping to help. Their explanation was fear. The risk of helping someone was too great, and with today's technology, they probably had a cell phone anyway. If they didn't, the walk to the gas station would be good for them and teach them a lesson for running out of gas. The other example is the plight of the homeless. When you pass them as individuals on the street, I see the way people selectively choose an alternate path to avoid them. Those 2 examples best define why time travelers do not show themselves. In trying to help you, we put ourselves at great risk, and there's really no point to it. We know the nature of time dictates that traveling between exact world lines is impossible. Therefore, the only results we will see will be the ones we stay to see. Since world lines, outcomes, and events are infinite, we have better things to do. When I arrive in the new 1998 world line on my way home, I could easily start all of this again and continue to go through the same conversations with all the same people. However, I know you won't pay any attention or believe me because we've already been through it on this world line. Besides, I think the walk to the gas station will do you some good. I also want to thank Pamela for helping me with the email and everyone else who asked intelligent and insightful questions. I've learned a great deal. My parting thought revolves around something JC has been harping on since day one. No, I do not have a secret agenda, but I have been paying a great deal of attention to your world line. My interaction with you was not a direct mission parameter, but it was a secondary mission protocol based on standing orders given to all temporal drivers. That secondary objective is basically to gather as much information about a world line based on a set of observable variables when we first arrive. Your world line met those conditions. What amazes me is why no one here wonders why Y2K didn't hit them at all. Bring a gas can with you when the car dies on the side of the road. Farewell, John. John Titor, at least the one who was posting on the Art Bell forums, was gone. But his story was far from over. For the next several years, to this very day, the John Titor story has accumulated a laundry list of potential collaborators, suspects, and cohorts. Let's take a look at some of them. You might have noticed that John mentioned a woman named Pamela. Pamela was a forum user who developed a close personal relationship with John, and reportedly they communicated a lot in private. John famously gave Pamela a secret song as a code. If he ever came back to this world line, he would tell her the song and she would know it's him. This has not yet happened. However, in 2017, Pamela contacted a man named Michael Sov, the writer of a book entitled Who Authored the John Titor Legend. She sent him the picture of an IBM 5110 label that John sent her. Remember though that John Titor got a 5100 and not a 5110, so I don't know why he would send her that. She also says that before he came, she saw him in a dream. Everyone thinks I started out asking John too many detailed questions when he came in 2000. But the truth was, I had a detailed dream of a time traveler in 1998. I didn't know exactly when I had the dream when I started talking to John in the beginning, but I remembered that dream. The questions I was asking him and his answers are what I saw in the dream, so I kept asking detailed questions. By then, I was intrigued by him. In my dream, I was in a car time traveling with a man where what he described exactly matched my dream. Later, before he left, he said he had to stop in April of 1998. I went and grabbed my notebook, and at the top was the date, April 1998. My mouth dropped, then I told John about my dream. And because of her relationship with John Titor, there's a lot of people who believe that Pamela is the key to understanding everything. However, there's also people who think she was just being trolled, or maybe she's just an attention whore. There's also the case of a man named Marlon Pullman. Marlon Pullman was a highly educated computer scientist who worked in software development and published a number of books on the topic. In other words, he was the kind of guy who would know exactly about the kinds of things that John Titor spoke of. And in 2004, he went and tried to patent John Titor's time machine. This of course caused a lot of people to think that Marlon Pullman was actually the man behind the posts. Marlon denied these claims, however, and said that this was simply a project he did to keep himself occupied while he was dealing with Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2002. In his own words, "I had nothing better to do. I think I made a mathematical error." He looked at the schematics that John Titor posted and he tried to reverse engineer the ideas based on the things that he said in his posts. And although Marlon has overcome the Hodgkin's lymphoma, his story took an unexpected turn in 2013, when he was convicted to 6 years in prison after pleading guilty to assault and drug possession charges. There's also the case of Oliver Williams. In the summer of 2001, a few months after John Titor left, Art Bell's forums closed due to clashes between the moderators and the users. The legend of John Titor might have been completely lost were it not for the efforts of Oliver Williams. He went on to create JohnTitor.com, which collected all of the forum posts in one place, as well as any news stories related to them. His website quickly became the central hub for all things John Titor related, and really was what got the popularity of the story into the mainstream. Because of this, there are some people who think that Oliver Williams was really the guy behind John Titor and just wanted to preserve his own story. In general, though, I think most simply view him as a John Titor enthusiast who is concerned with preserving the lore. What did raise a few eyebrows, however, was when he added a merch store in 2004 and included a book by the John Titor Foundation. When asked about this book, Oliver provided this update. Do you know anything about the John Titor book and/or the rights to use the story? As you may know, a book has appeared on Amazon.com that compiles all of John Titor's posts and pictures. It also has comments from John's mom in our time about what he wrote. I've also seen the book appear on eBay and it claims to have another picture from the time machine. I did get an email from an eBay buyer stating the book was signed by John's mom. They described the extra picture as a regular piece of paper folded inside the book. Apparently it has more technical details about the time machine. From everything I've seen from people who own the book, it's pretty good and gives you a different feel for the story. I understand that the John Titor book has representation through an attorney named Larry Haber. I'm no legal expert, but the attorney seems adamant that the author has the copyright to the John Titor story. So far, we have not had any requests to remove the content from our site. And it's with this update that Larry Haber, who many people believe to be one of the key players, enters this story. Larry Haber is an entertainment lawyer who's worked for Disney and was based out of Celebration, Florida, a town created by Disney. In fact, according to the Orlando Sentinel, Larry and his family were actually the very first people to live in Celebration, Florida. By the time of John Titor's posting, Celebration, Florida only had a population of 2,736 people. Here's a fun fact about John Titor. When he posted on the Art Bell forums and on the Time Travel Institute forums, his IP address was known. This IP address was not linked to Tampa, Florida, where he claimed to be from. Rather, that IP address was 66.8 miles away, a 1-hour drive in the small town of Celebration, Florida. With Larry Haber being the sole name connected to this new mysterious John Titor Foundation, and with the Celebration, Florida connection, he became the primary suspect to be behind John Titor. Whenever asked about it though, Larry claims that he was simply hired by John Titor's mother, Kay Titor. Meanwhile, an investigator named John Erasmus has been leading the hunt for John Titor for over 12 years and is one of the main people who spearheaded the investigation into Larry. And it was on February 13th of 2009 that John published his findings on a blog entitled The Erasmus Report. Erasmus begins by listing 88 names of forum users that he believes were fake accounts created by John Titor to help sell the story. Essentially, these accounts were only active while John Titor was active and gave him questions that might help him build the story that he wanted to build. As soon as John was gone, so were they. He goes on to name other potential suspects such as forum moderators and usual posters and rules them out. And he concludes the story by naming some suspects that he can't rule out, such as Oliver Williams, who he nicknames For Sale Oliver due to the Cafe Press store, and Larry Haber. And as suspicions around Larry Haber grew, people began to investigate not just Larry, but his family as well. It was Mike Lynch, a private investigator hired by an Italian TV show named Voyager, that started to point not to Larry, but to Richard Haber, Larry's brother, who is an IT technician. Larry, as a lawyer, might not have had the technical knowledge to talk about the 5100 the way that John Titor did, but Richard might have. And as suspicions around the Haber family grew and people kept on asking them about it, they wound up doing an interview with a YouTube channel called Where is John Titor?
I'm Larry Haber, attorney for the John Titor Foundation. This is my son Brandon and my brother Richard, who lives up in New York and is visiting us this week.
No one here is John Titor.
Although they mostly just denied the claims, there were a few interesting nuggets to come out of this interview, in particular, Larry mentioning a farewell video.
There is a departure video. I can't talk much more about it. I know that they also want to release that to make sure people understand that this is real and that John was here. I've seen it once. It looks real to me. I don't know anything more about it. Again,
how long is the video?
How long's the departure video? A couple of minutes is all I saw. I don't even know if it's longer than that. I saw 2 minutes of it.
That's it?
No. And as John Razumus continued his investigation, he began to look not just at Larry Haber and Richard Haber, but also at their other brother, Maury Haber. Maury Haber is another IT industry vet who maintains a blog about IT-related topics. By comparing the speech patterns of Maury Haber's blog posts to John Titor's forum posts, John Razumus has concluded that Maury Haber was in fact the man behind John Titor. So that's it. Maury Haber is John Titor then, right? Well, actually, it might be more complicated than that. You see, while most of the people who've come up in this story have denied being John Titor, there's actually someone who not only claims to be John Titor, but is actually insulted that nobody else thought it might be him. Let's take a trip back to the 1980s. It was at this time that a work of collaborative fiction known as Ong's Hat was made. Considered by many people to be the very first ARG or alternate reality game in history, Ong's Hat had components that were both online and in the real world. This game told the story of a device called the Egg, which would allow a person to travel between dimensions. Not too unlike what John Titor was describing. This work was created by a Netscape employee named Joseph Matheny, and he concluded it in 2001. According to Joseph, he started to become frustrated with Ong's Hat in the late 90s when it started to attract less people who were interested in the game and the fiction, and more people who were legitimate conspiracy theorists who thought it was real. He thought that these people were annoying and humorless and that they were ruining his game, and he came to dislike them intensely. So he began thinking of a project to troll these people, and according to Joseph, that's when John Titor was born. But it wasn't just him that was John Titor. According to Joseph Matheny, there were actually 3 other collaborators that he had.
So you were John Titor. You were the guy.
Well, I was one of the John Titors.
Yeah, see, I knew there was more involved than just one.
I think
the amount of shit that was going on, it could have only been more than one.
Yeah, but there was actually 4 of us. Me counting, counting me. Yeah, there was 4 of us.
He also claimed that the Haber family had absolutely no connection to the story, and he contacted them after the book was published.
I don't know if I want to go into it, but basically I put it on print.
Go ahead, yeah.
And I did it by contacting the guy who was publishing it and telling him in no uncertain terms, you know who you're talking to right now? You're talking to John Titor, motherfucker. You need to stop selling this book, or I'm going to go public with what a fucking fraud you are. And I'm going to tell people, even if I have to out myself to do it, I'm going to tell people, you know, that you are a chiseling, lying entertainment attorney and you should go over a cliff in a bus.
And if you look, the book did get taken out of publication very quickly, and a used copy can now fetch hundreds of dollars. So if what Joseph Matheny is saying is true, here's a potential sequence of events. Joseph Matheny and his cohorts developed the John Titor mythos in 1998. The faxes happen as kind of a dry run, they sit on it for 2 more years, and then he appears on the forums. The forum posts happen to gain a lot of steam, then in March of 2011 they pull the plug on it. The John Titor thing mostly gets forgotten about for 2 more years until 2003 when Oliver Williams makes his website. This website is created in June of 2003, and it's where the story really begins to hit its peak of popularity. Seeing that popularity, Larry Haber decides to create the John Titor Foundation in September of 2003 and do what he can to cash in on it. This is probably the most logical sequence of events if Joseph Matheny is to be believed, but I'm not so sure he is. That's because sometimes the things Joseph Matheny says about John Titor conflict with other things he said about it. Take this contradiction from a Thrillist interview he did. None of us were paying attention or curating this after a point. Sometime in 2000 is when we stopped doing it. So if they were done with it in 2000, that would eliminate all of the Art Bell forum posts. It wouldn't eliminate the Time Travel Institute posts, except for the fact that it had the same IP address as the Art Bell posts. So if what he said in the Thrillist interview is true, that means that he's responsible for only the faxes and no forum posts. Of course, there's always the chance that he just misspoke or misremembered the dates, so you can't be 100% about that either. What actually might be the most definitive piece of evidence so far is something that only came up very, very recently. Although some people were convinced it was Maury Haber by Rasmus's analysis of his speech patterns, some people criticized it, saying that it wasn't that scientific. So it was in August of 2018 that Michael Saab decided to take this line of investigation a step further. To do this, Michael enlisted the help of Andrea Nini, a forensic linguist who has investigated the Jack the Ripper letters in the past. And Andrea also brought his postgrad students to help him with this investigation. Their findings? First off, there's no way that John Titor was a real time traveler. This is due to certain elements of his writing style, in particular how he says website. In his posts, he writes website as 2 words, said Nini. One thing we know about English is that new word compounds of this type usually take the same path to become lexicalized into one word. Usually there's a cycle. Students looked at a collection of words called a corpus of English that include historical data, and you can clearly see that website behaves as it should. You can see it behaves like all the other compounds. Back at the time John Titor was writing, it was spelled as 2 words and that variant basically died. And now it's just 1 word. It would definitely disappear in the future. And they also provided a graph showing the declining use of website as 2 words. Additionally, Michael provided Andrea with a list of potential suspects. This list included Joseph Matheny, Oliver Williams, and Maury Haber. Writing samples were taken from these men and compared to John Titor's forum posts. After analyzing all the data, Andrea and his postgrad students concluded that the most likely suspect was Maury Haber. However, Andrea did give the caveat that this only analyzes who the most likely suspect from the pool of suspects is. If the person behind John Titor's posts wasn't in the pool of suspects, then this doesn't bring us any further to the truth. So essentially, this isn't saying that Maury Haber was definitely John Titor. What it's saying is that out of these suspects, he's the most likely one. So what do you think? Is Maury Haber John Titor? Is Joseph Matheny John Titor? Is it someone else? Or was John Titor really a time traveler? Let me know, this is a confusing one. And if you're interested in more stories about time travel, you might also like this video about safety not guaranteed. I'm out of here.